Hello, today on my channel you will hear an amazing story about life. I hope you enjoy this story. This one struck me to the core. Honestly, I still can't forget it. Enjoy watching.
Matthew was a short, handsome, middle-aged man. He had inherited his mother's large, expressive eyes and his father's well-defined, strong-willed chin. When he was a child, everyone said what a handsome boy he was, that he was a portrait. At school, Matt was a bit withdrawn and very serious. He got straight A's and went to university. Now, with half of his life behind him, he looked back with the thought that he had probably missed out on a lot. It was getting sad, and the weather outside the window was awful. The wind was smearing raindrops on the glass. It was raining for the fourth day, and the weathermen were not at all happy about the forecast. Matthew parked near the cemetery and got out, slamming the door of the new foreign car. He'd bought it only a year ago. He'd bought 2 cars that day, one for himself and one for his wife. She had just passed her driver's license and drove very carefully, but she liked it. She had a black car, tinted. That's what Catherine wanted. Matthew walked between the graves, trying not to step in the deep puddles. The path was painfully familiar to him. If someone had told him that he would be in the cemetery so often, he would have laughed out loud. Matthew hated such places. Having buried his mother, he preferred to remember her at home. He rarely went to the cemetery, but now he was frequenting it. By the way, his wife had died 4 months ago. Catherine had been killed in an accident, crashed in that black tinted car. It's unclear. Experts said that to establish the cause will not be possible, all burned out. But it was clear Katie lost control and drove into a tree. Apparently, the impact knocked her unconscious. She didn't like to wear a seatbelt, always use seatbelt plugs. She was wearing one at the time of the accident, so she hit the glass, lost consciousness and died in the burning car. Or maybe she died instantly. That was a better option than the last one. The Caddies got married spontaneously. They met. A spark. Matt was going through a difficult breakup. Catherine was just a loner. She was beautiful, smart, self-satisfied. Matthew fell in love with her and proposed, but he wasn't sure his feelings were mutual. All the time it felt like Katie was playing him, and in recent months, he was sure she had a lover. They'd been married for almost 3 years. It didn't work out that way. But Matthew convinced Catherine to take the girl from the orphanage. He'd wanted a baby so badly from the beginning, and Kathy said she had problems with it, and the doctors had given her a fat cross a long time ago. Every such conversation ended in tears and scandal. Katie didn't even want to think about the examination and surgery. She said that this topic was closed for her. She had resigned herself to the fact that she would never become a mom. Matthew had already insisted that they take the baby from the orphanage, otherwise divorce. Katie shrugged coldly. Have it your way, she was raising a 5-year-old baby girl, was engaged and Matt, not seeing her as a mother's love. She did everything reluctantly, became irritable. At one point, he even felt like he was forcing a child on her that she never wanted. So he hired a good, experienced nanny. Mila, the adopted daughter, quickly fell in love with L.A. Garevna, and Catherine was able to breathe a sigh of relief. Life went on. Catherine's death came as a shock to him, especially since he had to bury a charred skeleton. He remembered his wife smiling in the morning, joking about his stubble. She'd left without kissing him goodbye, just closed the door behind her. If only he knew he was seeing her for the very last time. Matthew didn't notice as his feet led him to the grave. Catherine looked up at him from the black monument and smiled, and he cried. Who is doing this? She suddenly uttered for the 3rd time. Matt noticed that the roses he carried to her grave were disappearing somewhere. He didn't like funeral paraphernalia and brought her fresh flowers, the ones Catherine had loved so much when she was alive, yellow roses. She adored them, saying they gave her a real euphoria. The last bouquet he'd left here no more than 3 days ago. After talking to the cemetery guard, Matthew realized he'd have to find Ryan on his own. The guard said he couldn't keep track of everything. The cemetery was huge, and of course he didn't care much for cemetery thieves, but somehow Matt was sure that his bouquet was being removed from his wife's grave, that the other one comes and throws away his flowers out of jealousy. She's been gone for 4 months, and you're still looking, he said, looking at himself in the mirror. The next day, Matthew asked a security officer at his firm to buy him a small hidden camera for surveillance. That same evening, he stopped by Catherine's grave. He watched, leaving a new bouquet there, hoping that whoever was taking his flowers would show up again. And so he did. Not 24 hours later, a little boy about 7 years old appeared on the camera. He came over, took the flowers, and took them somewhere. Matt saw it all in real time, being in his firm's office at the time. He got in his car and drove to the cemetery. His co-workers just shook their hands. After the loss of his wife, he was not himself at all. He could not recover. Matthew managed to catch the child on the way out. Stop right there, he said. I saw everything. Why are you stealing flowers? Matt scrutinized the little boy. He was poorly dressed, hatless, wearing only a hoodie. His feet were soaking wet. But instead of denying it, the boy's tone became surprised. There were no flowers in his hands. I'm sorry, he sighed. It's just that you're putting the flowers on an empty grave. I'm taking them to a real one. My grandmother died 2 months ago. I saw her being buried. Your grave is empty. Why did you make it in the first place? The child sounded like an adult. Matt shook his head. What did you just say? What do you mean I'm carrying flowers to an empty grave? That's where my wife lies, he objected. And you're taking the bouquets I bring her. And not for the first time already your wife was at her grave, the boy stammered. I ran away from the orphanage and went to talk to my grandmother. I was passing by. I looked. She was standing there, smiling. I looked at the photo and realized that she was looking at her own photo. I got scared. At first I thought she was dead or a vampire. And she noticed me looking at it and started cursing and yelling. She was scared, I guess. She told me not to tell anyone and threatened me, and I cried and ran away. It was hard enough as it was. I miss my grandmother a lot, and then she yelled at me. Matthew couldn't believe what he was hearing. They were standing outside the gate to the town cemetery. The wind was blowing. A light rain was falling. What was she yelling? Matt asked, trying to make sense of it. Told me to mind my own business and go my own way. And when I asked why they made a grave for her if she was alive, she started yelling that she was going to call a guard and have me taken to jail, and I had already escaped from the orphanage. I got scared and left. Matthew shook his head, and I realized what she was wearing. He wanted to know as many details as possible. To believe that Katie was alive was simply impossible. He had already resigned himself to the fact that he would never see her again. She was wearing a yellow jacket and a hat with a brim, and her hair was curly and loose and her lips were red. Matthew felt an electric shock. That's exactly what Katie had been wearing when she'd been in the accident. These are her clothes. The belt from her jacket was found burned. Was the belt on the jacket? Matthew asked. I don't think so, no. I don't remember exactly. You'll forgive me. I won't take any more of your flowers, since you want them that way. It's just that Grandma's never been given flowers, and these are so pretty. I believe she sees everything, and is happy when I come to her grave with flowers. She misses me too, I guess. The boy sighed and walked away. Matthew frowned. He felt terribly sorry for the boy, and decided that he would take him in. He felt light at heart, but on the way out he thought that such decisions were not made spontaneously. The only reason he wanted to take the boy in now was because he was pining for Katie tomorrow. That would go away. That's the wrong motive. Matthew decided he'd take a closer look at him and just take him in on weekends for now. The staff at the local shelter knew him by sight and treated him with respect. Matthew, after adopting Milana, became a regular sponsor. If something was needed, they would go to him and he would buy it. Is this the child you want? But why? The kindergarten teacher marveled. Matthew didn't put his idea on hold for long and stopped by the orphanage the very next day. Now he realized that the attitude to children here was not as sensitive as they try to show, since a 6-year-old child could run away freely. I know this boy a little, the teacher sighed. That's Sam Badgeroff, a bully, running away from us. Can you imagine such a thing? Matthew didn't pretend to be surprised, but it's probably not the boy's fault. You're the adults here. The kindergarten teacher looked embarrassed. Yes, you're right, of course. It's just that we haven't had this kind of thing before. I wouldn't advise you to take him anyway. The thing is, you won't be able to adopt the boy if you start taking him in now. You'd want him to stay with you forever. And they won't give him to you, will they? Why not? Matthew wondered. I heard his grandmother died. Yes, the grandmother is gone. And the baby came to us. But there's also the mom. She's missing in action. I went to the capital to earn money for an operation for her mom and disappeared. It's been over a year. Nothing is known about her whereabouts yet. The boy is hopeful, of course, but Matthew shrugged. I didn't know her. But that doesn't change the point. I'd like to pick Sam up on weekends. Let him play with Melanie. She lost her mom. She needs a friend right now, and then we'll see. Matthew made arrangements with the management and drove to work. He felt immediately relieved. The only thing left to figure out was who Sam had seen at the cemetery. Maybe he'd made up the story to justify the theft. The next weekend, Sam came to pick up Matthew. Nothing was said to the boy so as not to give him false hope. Seeing his uncle from the cemetery, the boy was frightened. I didn't take any more flowers. Honestly. I know they're still lying there, Sam blurted out. I came to see you about something else. I have a daughter your age. Her name is Melanie, and she used to live in this orphanage too. If you want to come visit with me, you can play with her. You'll watch TV. You'll play. I'll take you to the park. The day after tomorrow morning, I'll bring you back here again. I can't take you away for good, but you can come visit us for a couple days sometimes if you want, Matthew said, squatting down in front of the boy so he was the same height as him. Sam sighed and said in a businesslike manner, Okay, I love the park. My mom used to take me there, but I don't remember much about it anymore. I was just a kid then, and I'm almost 7 now. Melanie and Sam quickly hit it off. Matthew spent a wonderful weekend with them, slowly realizing that he wanted to take Sam back to his place right away. Bringing him back was very hard, but Matt promised he'd stop by during the week. He also asked how to find his grandmother's grave and promised to bring her a new bouquet of flowers. Sam swore in return that he wouldn't run away from the orphanage. Matthew questioned the boy again about the woman from the cemetery. He spoke confidently, clearly. Matthew believed his words. When Sam remembered that the woman's name was Catherine Poloskova, she pronounced the letters. She did it beautifully, like a French woman, and there could be no mistake. It was hard to believe his wife wasn't dead. Matthew puzzled if she had faked her own death. Why? He asked an investigator he knew to help him and told him of his suspicions. The phone conversation took place late at night. Matthew dialed and asked if it woke him up. He then explained the whole situation to Ethan. "You're an investigator, aren't you? You've got your brain sharpened for this. I just can't figure out if it's possible that the boy actually saw her, and if so, why did she do it? Maybe someone made her do it." Ethan was a longtime friend of Matthew's older brother. They had even spent New Year's Eve together at his brother's house once. Ethan had maintained a friendly relationship with him, so he was happy to help. It only took the professional investigator 30 minutes to solve this mystery. "I think your wife went to the scam because of the money. It's all trivial." Unfortunately, her life was insured. The payout was cashed in by one Jeffrey Krivtsov. Matthew dropped the phone from his hands, awkwardly trying to catch it on the fly, but failing. Picking the phone up off the floor, he yelped. "I'm sorry. What did you say?" "Krivtsov. Jeffrey." Katie was on life insurance. The moment Matthew realized Katie was alive, she was truly dead to him. How could she be? How much pain had she caused him? "I gotta run in with this guy. Couple of priors for drunken debauchery, and that's about it. He's a computer programmer, telecommuter, divorced, recently paid off a big alimony payment, probably from the money he got." "How much was the insurance money?" "Big enough to do something like that." I was surprised. "You wouldn't happen to have an address for this Jeffrey, would you?" Matthew asked. "Yes, write it down," replied the man. The next day, Matthew stood on the doorstep of a small private house. He was ready to talk to this man calmly. He just wanted to know where Kathy was now. He needed to find her, to talk to her, to explain himself. He could give her that money, just give it to her. That's all. Yes, at the marriage, Matthew's lawyers had insisted that she sign papers stating that she couldn't claim the company's money. Other assets were acquired before the marriage. Maybe she just wanted the money. But Matt wouldn't have turned her down if she'd just asked. So why would she do that? Maybe she was in some kind of trouble. But she could have just said so. Matthew pressed the bell a second time, and the door swung open in front of him. He saw Katie in front of him, alive and unharmed. She was wearing a pink terrycloth robe. Her hair was wet, apparently fresh from a shower. "Katie, you're alive," he pronounced. Matthew looked at her and couldn't believe that it was as if she wasn't surprised at all. Suddenly, he felt a tremendous pain on the top of his head. The sound of the impact echoed and he blacked out. Behind him stood Jeffrey with a baseball bat who had delivered the blow. Matthew woke up in a basement room. Dim light streamed in from above where there was a small window behind iron bars. His head was buzzing. A rushing panic came over him in waves. He sat on the ground. His arms were tightly tied with ropes and numb. His legs, too, were bound so tightly that it wasn't even worth trying to get out. The pain was so intense that Matthew let out a hoarse groan as he tried to free himself. His fingers wouldn't listen very well. He realized he couldn't even get to his feet. What kind of sadist had done this to him? Suddenly, Katie came to mind. Her lover must have done it. Oh my. She was nothing like he'd imagined her to be. You live under the same roof for years. You don't even know the person. "Are you awake?" came from behind him. Katie came into the basement. She was perfectly calm. He turned around, saw his wife. "Are you alive?" "Kathy, I was so worried. I cried so much." "But why did you do that?" Suddenly he thought the question was as stupid as possible. He's sitting in her lover's basement tied up. Why did she do that? But apparently not out of great love. "Yes, because I'm tired of living under the same roof with a man who doesn't appreciate me. You stopped courting, made me wipe the snot off someone else's child. I'm not a cook. And you were always demanding homemade borscht. I married you thinking you weren't poor enough to force me to be a servant, but no. It turns out you needed a cook, a dishwasher, and a nanny." "What do you mean?" "I just wanted a normal family. A normal family. We had a cleaning lady, we had a nanny. But even so, why? I buried you, didn't I? I have the papers in my hand that you're dead, your death certificate. So Kathy really did die. I have a different name now. I live under a different passport. What's that for? For the money?" "Yeah, for the money. Now Jeffrey's just gotten into your safe deposit box. Now we've got enough to go away and live the life you don't know how to live, Matt. You never knew how to live. You had to work. You had to have snotty kids in foster homes and help animals. You could have made a fortune. How many times have you been offered good bribes? But no, you and your honesty are completely out of touch. That's how everyone lives nowadays. You're a loser, an outsider. I hate you." Those words brought him to his senses. He realized what kind of person she was. Suddenly the thought came to him. It would have been better if she had died. At least her memory had remained bright. and she tied me up to steal from me. Yes, I knew you would find me. We were ready for it. Only something took you a long time to find. Anyway, I know the safe codes well. What are you going to do to me? Then I'll kill you. You're going to go missing. Got it. That's all. And I'll be gone, and everyone will think you just took the money and ran away, and no one will think anything of the groupie. The image of Sam and Melanie popped into Matt's head. How would they be without him? The investigator I found you through knows you're alive. You're going to be caught and put away. Katie, don't do anything stupid. Murder will put you out of prison for a long time. Take the money and go. And I'll still have my daughter. Do you know that? You don't have a daughter. Melanie would objectively be better off in an orphanage than loving you. My dream since our wedding day. I hate people like you. You've ruined my life. Matthew genuinely didn't understand why she was so angry with him. Yes, things hadn't been smooth sailing, but not that smooth. Catherine left and he started thinking about how to get out. He looked around, tried every possible way, screaming, calling for help, but no one came. Desperate, Matthew began to pray, then decided to go tricky, asking to go to the bathroom. Once again, no one came to his call. It wasn't until closer to evening that Katie and her lover came down to the basement. Still waking up, though. The couple is dying, the dark-haired man with the cold brown eyes said angrily. Matthew asked to use the restroom, but was simply thrown into the trunk of the car. Jeffrey was stronger than he looked. He picked up the bound Matthew and easily placed him in the trunk. In doing so, Matthew took a hard hit. His legs and arms ached like hell from the ropes. He was tossed from side to side on the road. Inside, he clearly realized that these were his last minutes of life. What to do? He began to remember the happiest moments of his life. Something from childhood, something from his teenage years, winning the Olympics, smiling at the prettiest girl in his class, a red certificate with a medal. Then adulthood, the army, where Matt went by choice. It was hard there, and he regretted his decision to serve many times, but in the end he was proud of himself. The next thing he knew, all the good memories were no longer associated with Katie, and after that, Sam, how would they work without him now? His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the engine quieting down. The car stopped shaking and came to a stop. Soon there was the slamming of doors, and a minute later the trunk opened. Everyone's here. They say you complained that your wife's grave was empty. We'll fix that now. Some alcoholics approached Kathy and she gave them money. They had shovels in their hands. Matthew understood. He was brought to the back of the Pogos so the guards wouldn't see him. It was dark. Jeffrey turned off the engine. The cemetery caretaker's booth was far away. There would be no way to yell. Matt realized that if he screamed, he'd just be hit on the head and buried unconscious. Surprisingly, the evening was very warm. It was the kind of evening that made one want to stroll leisurely along the promenade, gazing at the reflection of the lanterns, rather than prepare for a premature death in the cemetery at the hands of a loving wife. Matthew was dragged to Catherine's unearthed grave. Nearby stood a coffin containing the ashes that had then been passed off as her remains. Who would have thought you'd be lying in my grave? Kathy grinned. Matt realized she was crazy, and how he could have lived with her for so long without her noticing. You know, I cried on that grave. I wanted to come to you, and thought about being ready to die and lay next to you. That's how much pain I was in, Matthew admitted. Despite everything, he loved her very much. His words hurt Katie. She looked fearfully at her lover. He realized that she was getting emotional and might change her mind. There was still something human about her. Go to the car. I'll finish up here myself, Jeff said. Katie nodded and walked away with her eyes downcast. Next, Matthew was thrown into the coffin and started piling in. He began to panic. This as it ran through his head. He struggled to pull his arms, his legs. The ropes cut so hard that he was bleeding. Then the coffin was simply thrown into the grave. Matthew lost consciousness from the impact. When he opened his eyes, he heard earth being thrown from above. He shouted as hard as he could, and at that moment, everything went quiet. Nothing happened for a while. Maybe I've already been buried, he thought. Suddenly, someone stepped on the coffin lid. Help, help, cried Matt in panic. The next moment, the coffin lid creaked open. He saw before him the face of an unfamiliar bearded man. In his hands was a shovel. Up above the grave stood Sam, flapping his nose. So what would you do without me? He asked proudly. The undertaker helped Matt out of the grave. It turned out Sam had disobeyed and run away from the orphanage to his grandmother's grave. The boys were mean to him. They'd been teasing him all day, calling him names, and he couldn't take it anymore and ran away. He sat at her grave until late afternoon and was about to leave when he saw Matthew being dragged through a cemetery by a stranger by Klein. Behind him was the same woman he had seen before. Sam ran as fast as he could to the caretaker's booth, and the man came with a shovel as well. Jeffrey came up behind him. The man didn't see him. He was very busy burying a living man. We don't do that, the caretaker said, and hit Jeff from behind with the shovel on the head. He fell to the ground without feeling and lay there until the police arrived. Actually, Matthew didn't let him escape either. When Catherine saw him coming out of the gate, she got behind the wheel of Jeffrey's car and tried to drive away, but Matthew blocked her way with himself. He had already realized that she was only paying lip service to killing him. Running him over was not something she had the guts to do. Like Jeff, Katie was arrested that night. A bag of money from the safe was found at their home. The cemetery caretaker testified, and Sam stayed with Matthew until well into the night. When it was over, he called the shelter and told the story. "I'm taking him in, no matter if it's foster care or adoption. I hope you won't mind. The boy really saved my life. I can't leave him now," Matthew said. Smella didn't stay all night. Matthew apologized to her, paid her extra for overtime, and let her go home. Sam and Milana slept in the nursery. Sam was already used to sleeping on the small couch next to Milla's bed. Matthew still hadn't fallen asleep, the events still lingering in his head. Where would he be now if it weren't for Sam? He'd have run out of oxygen by now. He'd be dying underground right now. Toward morning, he did fall into a deep, restless sleep, and he woke up screaming. He dreamed of the coffin, the sounds of the earth hitting the lid. It was raining like a bucket. Sam and Millie were quietly watching television in the bedroom. Matthew thought long and hard about the best thing to do to get the boy. He needed to make sure his mother was sure not to show up. He already felt that he had grown attached to Sam. The boy was very inquisitive, so polite, so independent for his age, as if he were a grown man, only with a child's voice. Matthew drank strong tea without sugar and watched the drops dripping monotonously down the glass. Wow, so much has happened, Matthew thought. Just yesterday I was rooting for Catherine, going through the pain of loss. Today I almost hate her. Yesterday I would have given anything to see her alive, and today I'd trade a lot to keep things the same. "Hello, George Semyonovich. This is Matt Barinov. Yes, good afternoon. I'm going to be rich," he laughed into the receiver. He had 3 days of stubble on his face. He didn't have the energy or desire to shave. He contacted his old acquaintance and asked him to help. George Semyonovich was an extremely busy man, combining service in the agencies and the activities of a private detective. Having connections in all important departments, he could easily find a person, even if he went abroad. He was often approached by those who could not find their loved ones. Matthew revealed that he wanted to find Sam Barsukov's mom while she was still missing. "They won't let me adopt Sam," Matthew said. "Wouldn't it be easier to paw those who decide adoptions? Missing, and a long time ago besides. It's been, 2 years? Really? No, I have a different interest in this case. What if something happened to her? The boy misses her, tells me every now and then how wonderful she was. I'd like to find her. But if she's dead, her son has her, and that's the end of it. All right, I'll go through my channels. Just keep in mind, I'm not all powerful. Sometimes cases like this go unsolved, but my experience tells me that the mom just abandoned the kid and is doing God knows what in the capital." "Did she leave?" "Yes, it happened on December 28th. We got on the train on New Year's Eve, that's it. Where did he get off? Nobody key. Train, you say? How many people were thrown off trains in the 90s? It's not the 90s now, either." "Let's hope for the best," Matthew pondered, waiting for an answer from an old friend. For more than a week, he had been working remotely from home, only occasionally stopping by the office to check on things. The employees were doing great and didn't bother his boss about anything. Finally, late one night, the long-awaited phone call rang at his house. "I found Sam Barsukov's mom. He's now lying in a maternity hospital on the outskirts of Greenwood. It's a budget facility. Service leaves a lot to be desired. According to my sources, she decided to become a surrogate. She was in the hospital for a long time before that, treated for amnesia, but she still didn't remember anything when she was discharged. That's what the chart said. She lived with the tycoon Averin for a while. He works as an orderly in the very hospital where Inna was treated, and then became a surrogate mother for a childless couple. It was a family that shortly before the birth got into a car accident in full. Grandmother, grandfather, husband, and wife. Inna, while in the birthing center, had a difficult labor. According to my information, she has 3 children. Matthew was shocked. Wow. How on earth did she decide to do such a thing? Has her memory not returned to her? And she simply doesn't remember her mother and son. Amnesia, you say? Matthew stretched out thoughtfully. Yeah, that's what the patient's chart says. She had some oddities with her passport there. She restored it, recovered her medical policy, her SNILs, but she didn't ask for her son's birth certificate. Maybe it wasn't lost. Maybe someone deliberately crossed out the child from her documents. It's a dark story. I pity the girl, 26 years old, and she has 3 strange children in her arms, and, it seems, nowhere to go. But the guy she lived with in town, Jacob, according to my information, left the country. Both his parents were in Israel. Headed there, apparently they scattered. "Thank you so much. Can you tell me the address?" "Sure, right." After that call, Matthew sat staring at the same spot for a long time. It was extremely difficult to process what had been said in his head. He watched Sam brush his teeth in the bathroom. He did it thoroughly. His mom must have taught him to do it. He wanted badly to tell him that she was alive, that they'd all go to see her tomorrow, but he kept silent. The next day, Matthew picked up Sam and Millie and drove to the address. The drive wasn't too long. They made it in a few hours. Matthew didn't know how to tell the kid that they were going to his mom's house. What if his friend had made a mistake and she wasn't there? Enough with the kid being traumatized. "We're going to visit a good friend of mine," he lied. "Oh, come on, stop lying and don't," the boy replied. All the way they drank juices and watched cartoons on the tablet. Soon the maternity hospital appeared on the horizon. It was an old 2-story red brick building. Inna had obviously not gotten there from a good life. Probably she didn't want publicity. Surrogacy isn't exactly publicized. Or maybe she just didn't have the money for a good clinic. That's weird. The maternity hospital was in the middle of nowhere. There were some ruins around Stepby before the landing. "Okay, here we are. Let's get out," Matthew said. He opened the car door and the kids jumped out. As he approached the door of the maternity hospital, he bumped into an elderly full woman in a white coat. "Hello," he pronounced. "Is Sadie Williams lying here?" he asked quietly while Sam was distracted looking at the ancient wooden door. "Yes, right here. Come on in." "And you're the twins' father?" "Thank God we found them. I mean, the woman in labor was ready to call it quits. Said no one wanted her with 3 kids. Matthew and the kids were dressed in special guest robes. Sadie wasn't allowed in the room. They told her to wait in a small, shabby corridor where visits with relatives were allowed. A skinny, blue-eyed blonde with short, shoulder-length hair staggered in. She was pale, but even without makeup, in her robe and slippers, she was incredibly beautiful. Matthew smiled as he looked at her. He had expected to see a tortured housewife, not a cover model. "Mom," Sam shouted, nearly knocking Sadie to the ground. Her eyes flashed with confusion. The boy hugged her so tightly that he lost his balance for a moment. Matthew jumped up to catch her, but she stayed on her feet. "You found yourself, but where have you been?" "I missed you so much, Mommy," Sam cried bitterly. Sadie looked at him in surprise. Then something flashed in her eyes. It was as if she was back to the very day she had hugged her son on her doorstep for the last time. Her elderly mother put the money for her travel and lodging in the capital into her hands and smiled. "Everything will be all right," she said then. "I'll earn money, we'll do the surgery, and you'll still be running around like a young girl." My mother needed vascular surgery, which is quite expensive. There are few good specialists, and the right equipment could only be found in New York and the surrounding areas. Sadie was afraid that her mother would not last, waiting for a quota. The doctors stated that her condition was deteriorating day by day. Age was taking its toll. They had to operate, and fast. Sadie drove away, leaving her mother and son behind. On the way, she looked out the window and tried to think about how she would take care of her mother after the operation. Along with her in the carriage sat some sullen type, a young guy. With him was an elderly woman who had asked to switch seats with her. It's hard and scary for Grandma to climb on the top shelf, Sadie thought, hoping that maybe someone would also help her mom one day. Sadie remembered when the next station was announced. She jumped up. She realized she'd dozed off. She started to pack quickly. It was dark outside the train window. Dim streetlights illuminated some roadside diner. The train pulled in. Sadie got off. Several other people got off with her. She didn't know the area. She planned to walk to the diner and ask for directions there. But she didn't make it. Neck, ears, she heard from behind her. Sadie turned around, but didn't have time to see anything. At that moment, she received the hardest blow to her head. Everything after that was a blur. She remembered bits and pieces of regaining consciousness, seeing the dirt, feeling the cold. She couldn't move or utter a word. There was no one around. She lay there for a long time. She couldn't even remember exactly how long. It was cold. It was freezing winter rain. Then she woke up to the fact that someone was moving her onto a stretcher. Still alive, she heard a voice above her, "Let's hurry to the car." Who knows how long she's been lying here? It got a little warmer. Sadie passed out again. Then she woke up in the hospital. She didn't remember being washed and changed into warm, dry clothes. She was cold, with tubes sticking out of her arm. Sadie Williams said weakly, nauseous. An orderly, who was in the ward at the time, brought her a duck. Sadie thought she was going to throw up from dizziness, but it didn't happen. Then the treatment began. A meticulous elderly doctor with a black mustache asked, "What can you remember?" "Sadie. My name is Sadie." "I don't remember anything else," she replied. "Where do you live?" "I don't remember." "Family?" "I don't know. What year is it?" Sadie looked at the doctor surprised. "I don't remember anything." She started to panic. She started breathing deeply. The doctor called for a nurse and gave her an injection. Recovery was slow. She felt very sick. In addition, she needed documentation. The head doctor insisted on going to the police, but Sadie said she was about to remember everything. She believed she had family who would help her. It seemed the memory should be coming back by now. Sometimes faces, images, her old house and her nanny's childhood memories would come back in her dreams. She realized now that the memory was coming back to her in chronological order. The first images she saw in the dreams were of her childhood, their house, her grandmother, her father on his motorcycle. Because of this, Sadie thought she had a husband. However, time passed. The memories didn't come. "I can help if you want," the orderly told her one day. He stopped by Sadie's house every day. They just chatted. At first, she didn't care. Then she thought Jacob was trying to hit on her, and she felt bad. He seemed fake, not trustworthy. But time was running out, and she needed help. Sadie agreed, and Jacob found her through his contacts, took her photo, and within 24 hours brought her a printout of her old passport. "Sadie Williams, you're 25, he said. "Because I thought I was younger," Sadie smiled disappointedly. She looked 18. She thought she did until her memory came back. Sadie thought she was a student, that she had a family and maybe a boyfriend or even a husband. And friends, of course. That her whole life was ahead of her. "I have acquaintances in the local government. Let's go there. They'll get your papers back to you in no time today," Jacob suggested. She didn't want to go anywhere with him, but she needed her passport and health insurance. She had to agree. The expensive guy told her about himself, that he'd been through a bad breakup, that his ex had only wanted money from him and had left him. But he's just a regular orderly. Couldn't make it through medical school. His professors were prejudiced against him. Jacob helped him get his papers back. Only he deliberately withheld one important thing, that Sadie had a child. He also lied to her that Sadie's mom had died, even though she was still alive at the time, told that way so she wouldn't leave. Jacob kept declaring his love and eventually talked her into going to him. So they started living together. Little by little, Sadie got used to him and they started a relationship. At the same time, Jacob kept rushing her to work. It was important to him that they had a lot of money so that Sadie could make money. Sometimes he gave her tasks to put up posters, hand out flyers, or give messages for money to a neighbor. Sadie Williams was completely confused. She was living with him for free, unable to work full-time. Headaches and weakness after a serious injury made themselves felt for a long time. Her health was compromised. 6 months later, when Sadie had already started going on job interviews, Jacob had another idea. He came home in high spirits and said, "We had a rumor at the hospital today that a couple is looking for a surrogate. The woman is infertile. She had all her female organs removed. The husband wants to have children. They made an arrangement with our clinic, and those promised to do the procedure in a hospital setting. It's a simple procedure. Your egg and his material, carried it, gave birth, got a lot of money. Look, you don't make that much money in 9 months. They're willing to pay good money for a few years. It'll provide for us, we'll change the apartment, have a fancy wedding." "Let me do it," Jacob suggested. Sadie flatly refused, and he immediately made a scene. He reminded her that she'd been living in his apartment. She decided to leave. She packed her things and sat on the bench until midnight. Soon Jacob came down with a cup of hot coffee. It was clear to everyone she had nowhere to go. "I'm sorry, you're taking this too seriously. You're young, age-appropriate, also healthy. If you don't agree, this couple may be childless forever," he said. "It's a good deed, a self-sacrifice. You'll get credit in heaven. And you'll earn money honestly. You don't have to go anywhere. Sit at home, drink vitamins, take blood tests, and then they'll pay for your recovery. And in a year, you and me will have our own baby. Just think about it, okay? I'm not going to push you anymore. Let's go home." Sadie didn't want to go back, but she was determined to have nowhere else to go. In the end, she gave her consent. She underwent the procedure at the hospital. She soon found out she was pregnant by a man she didn't know. No, she had seen him, of course. The couple was immensely grateful to her. They kept calling, "How are you feeling? You're good, you're smart, you're so brave." "You know, we'll buy you a car," Jacob said, believing he could manage the money she was entitled to. The first payments went for checkups, groceries, and vitamins. Jacob liked to keep the money, and Sadie was getting sicker and sicker. The pregnancy had been hard. The baby's father had a rare blood type. There's only a handful of people like that in the world. Sadie has a negative Rh factor, which had a negative impact in her case. Sadie spent almost the entire pregnancy on the ward and developed depression. Jacob, on the other hand, hardly came around. But Sadie was glad for it. She realized that she didn't want to be with this man, that she was with him out of desperation. Sometimes she amazed herself for agreeing to be a surrogate, thinking about the fact that she would have to give her children to another woman and never see them again. She was ready to end it all. By then, she knew she was carrying triplets. Jacob just shrugged when he found out. Let them pay extra or put them in an orphanage. The couple, however, rejoiced at the news that there would be 3 children. Sadie asked if they would give one baby to her, but the woman flatly refused. She was even rude. Sadie cried for a long time, but eventually she got over it. The children would stay with their father, and this woman would raise them. The day she got the news that the biological father's entire family had been in a terrible accident and none of them had survived, Sadie was in shock. She stroked their bellies and contemplated the future. Now she was left alone with the children. The day before, she'd been wired money so she wouldn't need anything at the hotel, her salary and the promised large sum of money for handing the babies over to Jacob. There was a meeting to be had. Sadie called him. She knew he had withdrawn all the money. A decision needed to be made. Sadie took his hand. "Liam and his whole family are dead. There's no one to take the children. They're ours now," she said. She needed his help, and she decided to try and start over. The children would change their lives and they would become a real family. Sadie realized it was a desperate decision again, but she had no other choice, and it was too late to interrupt the payments. He was very upset, arguing, pacing back and forth in the room. Sadie looked at Jacob in incomprehension. "They're mine. They're biologically my babies." "What kind of termination?" "I'm 2 months away from having a baby." "There are 3 of them, not 1, born prematurely." Jacob shook his head. I get it. Okay, you just write a waiver. Those babies were orphaned, and there's nothing you can do about it. Their mother and father are broken. And you and I can have a baby of our own, or we can try to find another couple again, and you can have a baby for them. Or we could try to sell the babies. I mean, a lot of people want to adopt newborns these days. And you've got 3 whole ones on your hands. A jackpot. "That's right," Sadie replied. She got out of bed, even though it was hard. She walked over to Jacob and slapped him. He immediately slapped her back. She cried out. "And you think I'm going to curl up at work to feed other people's kids? And I don't need them. And you know what, Roll," he blurted out. Jacob didn't come back and left her destitute. Sadie spent the entire time in the hospital until she went into labor. The doctors were aware of the situation and didn't discharge her, leaving her in labor. A long-awaited section followed. For a while after the birth, Sadie spent unconscious, then just lay in the maternity hospital recovering. The babies were also very weak and gaining strength. Now Sam burst in on her, and one hug was enough for her to remember everything. Sadie clutched him tightly, and memories disturbed the memory. "How's Grandma, Sam?" she asked. Matthew and Millie were still sitting there, but Sadie hardly noticed them. She didn't stop hugging and kissing her son. "Mom, she's dead," Sam replied. Sadie burst into tears. Matthew told her the whole story from the moment he'd figured out the cemetery thief to how he'd decided to adopt him. "And finding you here in this hospital," he finished. Sadie, on the other hand, told him everything that had happened to her. They chatted through the evening. Sam and Millie almost fell asleep on the couch. "You know, I talked to the doctor. He's ready to let you go." "Are you going home?" Matthew asked. "Tonight? Maybe in the morning. Besides, how am I supposed to drive?" "I don't even have a carrier," replied Sadie. "Don't worry. I'll take care of everything," Matthew reassured her. Matthew and the kids stayed at a hotel. In the morning, they went shopping. Then he stopped by with a carrier. He bought everything the kids would need for the first time and took them not to their little house, but to his luxurious apartment. He had 2 spare rooms and a great desire to get to know Sadie better. He liked her at first sight. Once again, Sadie had to act on circumstances. This time she was genuinely pleased. Matthew was sympathetic, selfless, and not even thinking about using her like Jacob. He accepted her for who she was. Matthew was slowly growing closer to her. He wanted to get home from work sooner, and Sadie was waiting for him, providing the comforts of home. "There's going to be something yummy for dinner tonight. Can you get some seaweed? I read that it goes well with whatever I cook," Sadie said, smiling. Matthew was smiling too. "Okay, whatever you say. Anything else to grab?" Sadie shrugged. "Granddaughter has a fever again. I'm surprised Greg and Tim didn't catch it from him. He's been sick for a long time, hasn't he? We should take him to the doctor again. Why don't we go to another one?" Matthew took his son to the hospital. The next morning, they sat in the hallway holding hands. Sadie was very worried about how long it had taken the boy to get an MRI. The doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. When the doctor finally came out, Sadie jumped up and ran over. "The diagnosis has been made. Don't worry, it's treatable. He turned out to have a rare genetic disorder and a fairly rare blood type. We do such surgeries on a quota for children. Of course, you can also do it for a fee at the same clinic. I take shifts there too. It'll be faster. The problem is your son has a very rare blood type. Without a blood supply, it's risky to do the surgery." Sadie clutched her head and Matt smiled. "Well, you're lucky then. I have that type." Sadie hugged him so tightly that Matt caught his breath. Well. But we're still going to do the test first. Take your time to get excited," the doctor said. The blood came up. The doctors ran a few more compatibility tests. In the end, they delivered the strange news. The baby had similar DNA to Matt. If the father is not you, as you claimed, it can only be a close relative of yours, a brother, for example. "We're really lucky to have you. We can operate as soon as tomorrow." And while Sadie sat in the hospital corridor, praying that everything went well, Matt was on the phone with the same detective. George had promised to help sort out the situation and had done so extremely quickly. The operation was still in progress when he called back and asked, "Matt, are you aware that you were adopted?" "Yeah, I managed to find out a few things. I went into the orphanage with my brother, but they took you away already alone. You were twins, born on the same day. You probably know that your birth mom died in childbirth. She had no relatives. She was only 17 at the time. I made inquiries, but they never told me anything about a brother," the detective reported. Apparently, at the maternity hospital, the superintendent was bribed and the baby was taken away. You weren't supposed to be legally separated. The brother's name was Liam, Matthew pronounced, remembering what Sadie had called the boy's biological father. At one end of the hallway came Matthew, bearing the news that he was an uncle to her sons. At the other end of the corridor, a doctor was hurrying to tell her that the operation had been successful, the pathology had been eliminated, and her son's life and health were no longer in danger. Sadie remembered that day forever. She and Matthew finally confessed their feelings for each other and decided that now they would be a couple. A short time later, Johnny was discharged and the three were reunited. Matthew couldn't let his discovery go any longer. He decided to get to the truth. He found the manager of the orphanage where he and his brother had been admitted. He went to his house to look him in the eye. The door was opened by an elderly man. "You don't remember me. I was very young when I saw you," Matthew began. The landlord nodded and invited Matt into his apartment and told him how he had given his brother to a rich couple. They paid well. I was in trouble at the time, in debt. My wife was sick. I just couldn't help but take the money. Seeing that the superintendent lived in a very modest apartment, that he was deeply unhappy, Matthew didn't go anywhere, just accepted the apology and left. Now he found out the truth to make the elderly man's life easier. Matthew said he forgave him. A year later, Sadie and Matthew were already married. Since the twins had started walking, there were more worries, with the help of a nanny. Matt officially adopted all of Sadie's children. Sadie also became mom to Melanie. The girl became instantly attached to her and Katie. She'd never seen anything closer. But Sadie loved her immediately and called her only mom.
Weds left the registry office. Nature itself seemed to welcome them. Half an hour ago it was pouring dreary rain, and now suddenly a friendly sun shone, and even the puddles, which had not had time to dry out, already looked cheerful. More precisely, the mirrors scattered everywhere, reflecting the clear blue sky and tender spring leaves on the trees, looked festively bright, as if the whole world had washed and beautified itself for their sake. "Isn't it beautiful?" cheerfully remarked the young bride, who had just become a lawful wife. She was not dressed in a white wedding gown, but in an ordinary, and also quite inexpensive dress. But what did it matter when the girl's eyes shone with love and happiness? "Why, you are a poet," Emily whistled the young husband admiringly. "Why, that's a beautiful thing to say." The thin wedding ring beat off a ray of sunlight on her finger. Emily raised her hand and laughed joyously. "You know," she said, snuggling up to her lover, "I never noticed before that ordinary engagement rings like this could be so beautiful. It's beautiful, isn't it?" "It is," he smiled. "Now you and I have something important to do." Michael took his wife's hand, kissing the palm of her hand. "Let's go meet my mom." "You're related now, aren't you?" The girl's smile faded immediately, as if a cold wind had snuffed out the candle's flame. "I'm afraid," she confessed. "Bridge of what?" Emily bit her lip and fell silent. "Come on," her husband encouraged. "What is it?" Emily looked up at him. "Glad I read about your mom on the internet. She has a social life, jewelry, all sorts of events." "And what's wrong with that?" Michael asked. Getting into the car, she sat next to him and shook her head thoughtfully. "No, nothing wrong, but she's different, isn't she?" "Very different." He stroked Emily's hand affectionately. He felt sorry for her. What's there to be afraid of, honestly? So what if it's different lifestyles? It doesn't matter at all. Mom's just like mom. Opposites attract. He winked, at least if science doesn't lie. "So, shall we go?" Emily sighed. "Well, let's give it a try." The car stopped in front of a tall wrought iron fence, behind which they could see a luxurious mansion, 3 stories high with elaborate tracery and tall windows, with an alley leading to the front door of the villa, lined with rose bushes in full bloom and scattered with large white buds. "Beautiful," Emily sighed admiringly. "How well tended are the roses?" "Yeah, they're Mom's favorite variety," Michael nodded. "I forget what they're called, don't I? We'll ask her just the same." "Yes, Mom." The girl faded again. "What's the matter again, Emily?" "Nothing. I just think maybe we should have met earlier." The girl looked sadly at her simple dress. "You know, I bought this dress a year ago at a sale for 500 rubles and thought I was very lucky. It's a nice, great dress." Her husband supported her. "And it suits you very well." Emily sighed. "I thought so too. And now I saw this house here where your mother lives, and suddenly I felt that you can't pay just 500 rubles in it. You see, in my world I'm well dressed. And in your mom's world, I'll probably end up a ragamuffin." Michael laughed as Sandra Denver. "Well, if that's the case, we can buy you a new dress right now. Would you like one? No, Emily frowned. Why would I want to pretend to be someone else? I'm just me. I'm just afraid my mom won't accept me and say, here's this ragamuffin trying to fit in with a rich family. Oh, come on, Michael reassured her. Mom's a smart woman. She didn't grow up in a cradle of gold either. And I didn't tell you. And yet. All right, he decided, get out from behind the wheel. Let me go alone first, talk to my mother, get her ready, and then I'll come back for you. Well, wait for me then. I'll be right back. Emily nodded. The footsteps died down behind the fence. Then she heard the front door slam, and the second she heard it, she wanted to jump out of the car and run for her life. She had no business being here. She was out of her league. Jennifer Smith was having a rough day. She'd just gotten home from a massage. Usually she was on wings after a session like this, but not today. Jenny, bring me some herbal tea, she tossed to the housekeeper as she passed the kitchen. By the way, Mrs. Smith. The housekeeper did not hear the reply. She went up to her room and sank into a chair in front of her dressing table. Why is everything so unfair? She thought. It would seem that she had lived wisely, but she had fallen in like a fool. I'm the stupidest person in the world. Maybe it's because I've never done anything stupid, she thought with an almost superstitious fear. What if she had broken some laws of the universe? After all, a person should not only be guided by reason, but also do something stupid at least once in a while. She wrinkled her forehead, trying to remember. Had she never ever given in to her feelings? Had she ever done anything she would regret? I don't think so. But unless you counted one silly affair in her youth at 17, when the sky was high and piercingly blue from the smell of blossoming apple trees, she was dizzy. The boy corresponded to all the dreams of a romantically inclined girl, who did not accept courtship because all her suitors were something wrong. What a bunch of nerds, thought young Jennifer. And they're all so handsome, and just waiting for the moment to move to the main, from their point of view, the expression of sympathy, horizontal. Young Jennifer was sick of these insolent men. She wanted something romantic, tender, and awe-inspiring, something that would make her heart sink. That must be why she saw in the beggar street artist her dream come true. Jennifer Smith smiled, remembering their first meeting. The spring drops were ringing outside, the sun was shining, and it was so joyful and fresh that it seemed as if she were about to lift herself off the ground and fly into the air, light and swift as a bird. She did not notice the young artist sitting on a chair, who was watching her with a smile, nor would she have noticed if he had not called out. Wait, I have to draw you. She frowned, ready to lash out at him but couldn't. The gray eyes were too welcoming, the wide smile too disposing. I don't have any money, she warned just in case. I don't need any, he replied nonchalantly and leaned over his notepad. 10 minutes later, Jennifer was already holding a quick pencil sketch of a thin girl walking down a spring street. Except if you look closely, she wasn't touching the ground. You like it, he smiled. That's how I saw you. She didn't answer. He understood her mood. Read it like an open book, captured the movement of her soul, saw the invisible. What's your name? John asked. He was young and handsome, like a young god. Or maybe it only seemed that way. And what could it matter when it was springtime? And you, young and beautiful, he said. And when your head is spinning with love, and he is your one and only, also desperately in love with you. Everything was so beautiful. The looks they exchanged, the pounding of their hearts, the slight discharge of electricity as they held hands and hands. Oh my God, he was taking her hand, not reaching for some more seductive part of her body. He was really taking his time. And in gratitude for this delicacy, the girl's heart melted like a spring in the bright sunshine. Did they have leisurely walks in the evening city? The artist read some inexpressibly beautiful poems and gently squeezed her palm, and she would also come to visit him. He lived in a communal apartment with wooden floors, huge windows, and narrow winding corridors. Not quite sober neighbors were always wandering through these corridors, but somehow it didn't annoy him at all. Because there, behind the shabby door of the second door on the left, there was real magic. Jennifer took off her sandals, slapping barefoot on the warm floor. The painter was always busy, only taking a second away from his easel to nod. Jennifer sat with her feet on the windowsill and waited patiently for her lover to take a break. He shoved an old mug of iced green tea into her hands. She'd never tasted anything so delicious before. The mug's handle was chipped, and Jennifer ran her fingertips over the cracked areas, feeling every indentation. Finally, it was time for a break. The sheets were quickly becoming damp from the heat in their heated bodies. Then Annie swayed in sweet exhaustion while he moved her hair and told her stories, sometimes sad, sometimes funny. And the heat rose little by little, and the interminably long day folded into twilight. And Jennifer's heart snapped at the thought that perhaps it would soon be over, their honeymoon dragging day without time. She hadn't mentioned that she'd traveled to the capital just a month ago to try her luck at a modeling agency. The girl had been in that crazy city for a week, running from one casting call to another, and now she was waiting for an invitation. Of course, no one promised her anything, but deep down Jennifer had no doubt she would be invited. And this feeling of imminent separation strengthened her love, gave it some painful sharpness. And the invitation came. Jennifer packed her things and stopped by the artist's house on the way to the train station. She didn't feel like a long goodbye. He looked at the travel bag in surprise. "I have a train in 2 hours," Jennifer said. "I've been called to work for a modeling agency, so I thought I'd go." "Well," he stretched out thoughtfully, "it'll be better for you that way. You'll have a business you love." And for you, 1,000 times she had promised herself not to ask him that question, but she couldn't help herself. "Would it be better for you too?" He smiles. "I have my pencils and paints. That's quite a lot, as it may seem." "I see," Jennifer replied, though she didn't really understand anything except that he was okay with her leaving. Plain gratitude for this delicacy made the girl's heart melt like a fontanelle in the bright sunshine. Did they have leisurely walks in the evening city? The artist read some inexpressibly beautiful poems and gently squeezed her palm in it. She also came to visit him. He lived in a communal apartment with wooden floors, huge windows, and narrow winding corridors. Not quite sober neighbors were always wandering through these corridors, but somehow it didn't annoy him at all. Because there, behind the shabby door of the second door on the left, there was real magic. Jennifer took off her sandals, slapping barefoot on the warm floor. The painter was always busy, only taking a second away from his easel to nod. Jennifer sat with her feet on the windowsill and waited patiently for her lover to take a break. He shoved an old mug of iced green tea into her hands. She'd never tasted anything so delicious before. The mug's handle was chipped, and Jennifer ran her fingertips over the cracked areas, feeling every indentation. Finally, it was time for a break. The sheets were quickly becoming damp from the heat in their heated bodies. Then Annie swayed in sweet exhaustion, while he moved her hair and told her stories, sometimes sad, sometimes funny. And the heat rose little by little, and the interminably long day folded into twilight. And Jennifer's heart snapped at the thought that perhaps it would soon be over, their honeymoon dragging day without time. She hadn't mentioned that she'd traveled to the capital just a month ago to try her luck at a modeling agency. The girl had been in that crazy city for a week, running from one casting call to another, and now she was waiting for an invitation. Of course, no one promised her anything, but deep down Jennifer had no doubt she would be invited. And this feeling of imminent separation strengthened her love, gave it some painful sharpness, and the invitation came. Jennifer packed her things and stopped by the artist's house on the way to the train station. She didn't feel like a long goodbye. He looked at the travel bag in surprise. "I have a train in 2 hours," Jennifer said. "I've been called to work for a modeling agency, so I thought I'd go." "Well," he stretched out thoughtfully, "it'll be better for you that way. You'll have a business you love." And for you, 1,000 times she had promised herself not to ask him that question, but she couldn't help herself. "Would it be better for you too?" "Adventures. I have my pencils and paints." "That's quite a lot, as it may seem." "I see," Jennifer replied, though she didn't really understand anything except that he was okay with her leaving, and that was a shame. She pulled a small box out of her bag. "Here, take this," she said, "a parting gift. It's a new mug." "Thank you. I don't have a gift for you. It's not like I didn't know." "And you give me the old one." The girl smiled. "The one I used to drink tea out of." Then he made green tea again from that very mug. But for some reason, her favorite drink was not as delicious as before, and the new life was no longer so enticing. Where to? Modeling career suddenly seemed just a deceptive gloss in which was wrapped in emptiness. There was nothing inside, nothing that could be called. That's what it seemed to her. Left in that room, she walked barefoot in the bright streaks of sunlight on the floor, in the quiet voice of someone who made up stories for her. That was it. The real thing. At the modeling agency, she was greeted coolly. The principal, a well-groomed, dry lady in a business suit, was able to look the girl over from head to toe. Sighing, she shook her head. Jennifer waited in silence. So then, the lady announced her verdict. You shouldn't think you got the invitation because we're all friendly here, all swooning over your beauty. You are far from Naomi Campbell, and on the pale shadow of Claudia Schiffer also do not pull. But if you don't act like a fool, you'll have a good chance. Do you have potential? Thank you, Jennifer said. What do I have to do? The CEO grinned. She had very white teeth and glasses with that frame. It made her face seem somehow predatory. But you're always fat. How much do you weigh now? 48 pounds. That's a lot. You'll always weigh 2 pounds more than you need to. Internalize that right away because of the nature of the job. Understand? Second, in the modeling business, no one will babysit you. There are 1 million people like you, with more or less correct facial features. So I don't advise you to be capricious and overdo it. They'll tell you to go as a promoter to the presentation of a new brand of margarine, so there. They say go to a lingerie fashion show, so there. And 3, you'll get in. It depends a lot on you. You'll be a rich celebrity. If you don't, you'll live forever on pennies, and sometimes not even pennies. That's your choice. Now, do you want to work for us or not? If you say you do, we'll sign the contract. If you don't, get out. Jennifer looked down at her arms and legs, which were as thin as twigs. Where else was there to lose weight? You're always fat. If she lost another 2 pounds, she'd be winded. But advertising margarine, isn't that what she dreamed of? Not to mention going to a fashion show in her underwear. Who's going to be watching? Fat men with oily looks. I'm out of here, she said, and quickly, so she wouldn't have time to change her mind, walked out the door. Just like that, in one fell swoop, she was done with foolishness and romance, with first love and ambitious girlhood dreams. But everything was normal from then on. I entered the Faculty of Foreign Languages. I got a job at a reputable firm, and married without much love, on calculation, but with sympathy. By the age of 30, she gave birth to her only child and never went to work again. Her husband was a rich man, the kind who sometimes marries humble translators. Who knows why? Maybe because they have everything, and they do not need the love of recognized beauties. They've had enough. When her husband died suddenly of a heart attack, Jennifer did not feel a particular loss of a spouse with whom she lived for almost 24 years. She did not even have time to get attached. He was always away at work. Jennifer could not remember a single vacation, a single weekend that they would spend together. When he died, she became the heiress to $1 million fortune. That, at least, was how it seemed. But the illusion, as sometimes happens, was shattered by the harsh reality. Suddenly, it turned out that her late husband had been dodging money from the IRS, and he had accumulated so many debts that once they were paid off, one could forget about a comfortable life. While the lawyers sorted out the tangled affairs, the widow locked herself in the house. Spent a week in bed with a cold compress on her forehead. Everything fell apart. Everything. And the worst of it was that there was no strength at all to pull herself together, to try to figure things out on her own, to get out of bed. Jennifer dialed the number of her therapist. I need counseling, she exhaled. Maybe even a phone one, but I really need it. After listening to her rambling story, the connoisseur of human souls asked only one question. What do you personally want? Jennifer hesitated. Honestly, she admitted, it's embarrassing to even say, inappropriate somehow. And yet I want to go somewhere by the sea, and not think about anything for at least a few days. When she said it aloud, the wish ceased to seem so ridiculous. Do you think I'm allowed to go away? You should, rather. Within hours, Jennifer was already sitting in the cabin of an airplane. A week at sea might not solve anything, maybe, or even for sure, but at least it would help calm things down. She discreetly dropped her shoes and stretched out her legs. Stewardess obligingly leaned over. Perhaps you need a plate or a sleep mask. She hated to admit it, even to herself, but she was lying about something. In telling her about her desire to leave, she had left something else out. After the death of her husband, after all the problems with her inheritance, Jennifer Smith suddenly had an unbearable desire to love and be loved. It seemed to her that there could not be a more absurd desire. But coffee was served. Jennifer Smith gave herself a moment's reflection and concluded that her desire was quite normal. After all, she had never felt so defenseless as she did now. And more than anything else, she wanted someone strong to hold her and say, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." Jennifer Smith sighed. Alas, such a man was not around and was not expected. She had no complaints about the lack of male attention. But it was just as it had been so many years ago in her youth, although perhaps not like then. But even more cynical, more evil. For some reason, her current suitors didn't want to court her, but immediately and directly offered to continue acquaintance in the bedroom. They were genuinely surprised when Jennifer Smith suggested to get to know each other better. "And what's the drag?" surprised one of her fans. "We're not children, we're adults." Already you would think that since adults, everything is reduced to a mere manifestation of the flesh. Particularly desperate suitors immediately after acquaintance began to make plans for a joint life. Those attracted by money, and they did not even give themselves a labor to hide their mercantile interests. Jennifer Smith didn't know what was worse. The current awkward advances of guys who responded so strongly in her youth seemed almost touching. Maybe because as the years passed, all the unpleasantness faded from memory. "There is no happiness in life," she whispered earnestly. But life prepared a pleasant surprise, which Jennifer Smith could not have expected. The first night she heard about a beach party and decided to go there to unwind. She wanted the music, the dancing, the glow of a bonfire at night. Going to the beach, Jennifer Smith put on a light white dress and a couple of favorite jewelry. The night beach and the big southern stars, the melodic chiming of guitar strings, the cheerful tiny world she needed so much right now. No sooner had she gotten close to the dancers than someone grabbed her arm and immediately dragged her away. Jennifer Smith laughed as she danced, the scarlet glow of the fire flickering in her eyes, casting a warm glow on the skin and hair of the dancers, rhythmically changing tune after tune, the last one slow and gentle. Someone touched Jennifer Smith's shoulder lightly. "May I?" he said softly, and she laughed and gave him both hands. Jason, the artist, wasn't the same man he'd been before. The years hadn't chopped his features, but made them more masculine. His gaze was still as clear and direct, but now it had the gentle wisdom of a man who had seen much but had not lost his kindness. He drew her to him, and Jennifer Smith did not want to resist. She clung to him as if he were the nearest and dearest person in the world. "What are you doing here?" she asked, swaying in his arms to the beat of the music. Nothing much, just relaxing." "Is this my party?" Yeah, he shrugged nonchalantly. "I come here once a year and have this party on the beach at night. People have fun, get to know each other, and you can just come and dance and forget about everything for a while." "That's just me," Jennifer Smith sighed. Jason smelled of the sea, of thunderstorms, and of some elusive but marvelous perfume. She wanted to nuzzle her nose into his neck, close her eyes, and breathe in that magical mixture of scents. As if he sensed it, he put his palms on the back of her neck and pulled her to him. "What do you want to forget?" he asked. Her didn't want to answer. It was so good to be silent, to breathe, to live this moment. But the question was asked. "My husband died," she answered reluctantly. "And then it turned out that he had enormous debts. And if I paid them off, I'd be left with nothing." Jason was silent for a moment. "How much did he owe?" "It doesn't matter," she mumbled, pulling herself tighter. "Don't ask." "I already asked," he insisted softly. "A word is not a sparrow." Jennifer Smith lifted her head and, with her lips just touching his ear, said the amount. Well, she grinned. "Is it impressive?" She expected to see incomprehension, consternation in his eyes. But something was wrong. He was smiling calmly and brightly, as if he had heard some nonsense not worthy of attention. "Why are you smiling?" she asked angrily. "Does it amuse you so much?" "I'm sorry, honey. I'm not laughing. I'm rejoicing," Jason said. "For your problems." Jennifer Smith shook her head. "I'm glad that I can get you out of trouble," he said. "What? What are you talking about?" Jennifer Smith whispered in amazement. "I'm saying I'll pay off all my debts tomorrow. Don't you worry about that. Now let's dance some more." Jennifer Smith pulled away from him and looked closely and sternly into his eyes, trying to find a shadow of mockery in them. Jason, who are you? You used to be a poor artist, and now you say—" He put his arm around her shoulders and laughed softly. "Let's go sit down and have a drink. Apparently I have a lot to tell you." They moved away from the dancers toward the sea. Jason took a flat flask out of his pocket. "It's rum. Will you have some?" She took a sip and didn't regret it. The rum was deliciously smooth, with a tart aftertaste. "Cherry." Jennifer Smith smiled. "Tasty. Then it's also listenable. When you left, I almost drank myself to death," Jason began. "But you let me go so easily." Jennifer Smith smiled slyly. "Why?" He shrugged, keeping his gaze on the dark sea. "You wanted to be a model to shine. When a man wants something so passionately, you have to let him try. I loved you, but I didn't want to tie you down." Jason ruffled his graying hair. "It was painful to tear you from my heart. Honestly, I don't know if I would have gotten drunk. But then disaster struck. My father collapsed after a bad accident. So I rushed over to help him. Actually, he had 3 of us sons. I was the youngest. We all took care of my father together. We were on duty at his bedside, fed him, changed his clothes. We took turns doing whatever we needed to do. But, you see, my older brothers were already married. They had their own boys growing up. So I suggested they go back to their families. And I, as the priest, stayed with my dad. I didn't leave him for a year. My brothers came too, but less often. And it's quite natural. A year later, Dad passed away. Jason was silent for a moment. The waves lapped at the shore, and it seemed to be the only sound left in the silent world. "My father was not a poor man," Jason continued, "and he left us a good inheritance. But my brothers gave up their share in my favor and decided I deserved it more than they did, because I took care of Daddy until the day he died. That's how I became a wealthy man. But I didn't want to just spend the money, of course. I wanted to put the money to work, to multiply it eventually, and to thank my brothers for their generosity. You realize such selflessness is rare. Sometimes family members are willing to cut each other's throats for money. But here, no one took a penny for themselves. They gave it all to me. I decided to take a risk and open a coffee shop. There weren't many of them back then, and mine became an instant hit. Then I opened a second, a third, and now I own a thriving chain. Our food is always delicious. Our prices are reasonable, and we cater to people of all classes, not just the select few." "And painting?" Jennifer Smith asked. "Willingly for the soul," Jason smiled. "Art isn't very lucrative, at least not for everyone. I don't know how to make a profit from it. Maybe it's for the best. What do you think, Annie?" Jennifer Smith ran her arms around his neck. "I don't think anything," she whispered. "Nothing." The 2 weeks at the seaside flew by like a dream. Jennifer Smith flew on wings of peace and happiness. Her inheritance had been saved, and at last the man she loved was at her side. Now it was possible to breathe easy, to enjoy what life so graciously was. She'd even decided to introduce her son to Jason, only by video link, of course. But they would meet again when she returned. "We won't be separated when it's time to leave, will we?" Jason asked. "Or are we just having a little vacation romance?" "I don't want to break up," she said simply. But the idyll ended, as always, abruptly. Jason came to her room that morning, and Jennifer Smith knew immediately that something bad had happened. His eyes were too sad and his face too pale and lost. "What's wrong?" she asked. He shook his head as if trying to collect his thoughts. "Yes, trouble. Brandon, my older brother. He passed away today, pneumonia. I knew he was sick, but I thought, anyway, I'm going to have to go to the funeral. But not only that. You see, Brandon has a child out of wedlock. I was the only one who knew about it. My brother always took care of him, though. It's a complicated story. The girl's mother died early, and Brandon. He knew his wife would never accept another man's. He had to agree to keep the girl in an orphanage, but he always took care of her. Now I have to find her because I'm her uncle." Sometimes he didn't think about it. Was Michael really such a good guy? Or was it just a deliberate way of dealing with everyone and always being nice? And get his little and big benefits from it. That's the kind of person the waiters save the best tables for. And flight attendants carefully offer a second plaid, but it probably wasn't that. Michael, unlike his cold-hearted mother, was warm and compassionate. It's his nature. And thank God for that. Opening the door to his mother's room, Michael squeezed his eyes shut. White always made his eyes hurt in here. Everything was white. The floor was covered with an off-white carpet. There were white vases on a white table. The peonies, by the way, were white and pink, and Michael tried to look exactly at them, the only colored spot in this snowy realm of style and purity. His mother came out of the bathroom and smiled discreetly when she saw her. "Hello, Michael. Is there something you wanted to tell me? Have a seat." Michael glanced fearfully at the white upholstery of the chairs. White noise. Honestly, it was kind of scary to sit on that. For some reason, it seems that your clothes are dirty, although of course they're not, and you're bound to get it all dirty. "Yes, I won't be long," he said. I just wanted to tell you that you're going to meet a nice person soon." Jennifer Smith climbed into the chair with her legs tucked up. She had knees of unprecedented beauty. It's rare for a girl to have them. "And who is this person?" she asked. "Lindenshire, your daughter-in-law, and in the near future she will be the mother of your grandson. So be nice to her, please. She's very shy and in general, so she's a little apprehensive about making this acquaintance. But we'll try." "You're crazy." Jennifer Smith was in her usual role, a perplexed raised eyebrow and contempt in her voice. That was all her indignation. "And if you're going to get married, you should have asked my opinion." Michael suddenly thought he'd never seen his mother truly humanly angry. Normal people might blush with anger, not scowl. It's not a pretty sight, but it's natural. It is clear that the person in front of you, not an emotionless machine, but with Jennifer this never happened. The image of a flawless lady, the one who does not waste time on such trifles as emotions, completely absorbed her and completely eradicated the usual human weaknesses. "Mother, you've always loved an independent character. What's wrong with raising me that way? I work, I provide for myself." My mother stood up and paced the room nervously. "Independence and recklessness are different things, Michael. You're the heir to everything I have, my entire fortune, and you don't know everything. It cost me some effort to hold on to what we have, and we could have lost everything, absolutely everything. And just when I was calming down, just when I was breathing freely, you show up and tell me that you've decided to start a family. What's wrong with that?" "Nothing. But in this case, I have the right to know in advance who you plan to share the inheritance with. Isn't that right?" "Right," he admitted it reluctantly. "But you'd be against taking some orphanage girl as your wife." "How's that? Do you realize what she's interested in the first place? She loves me, she loves me, she loves me, but not you. And she loves a guy from a rich family, a guy who drives a new car and flies to Paris on the weekends just because he wanted to walk in the Latin Quarter. Now tell me, if you were a pauper, would she love you as much?" He walked to the door, but it's a pointless conversation. "So are you ready to meet your sister-in-law? If not, let's postpone the meeting to a more appropriate time." Jennifer Smith let out a long sigh. "God be with you. Lead the way. Let's see who you've chosen for yourself." Of course, she didn't want to see her new daughter-in-law at all. But since it had been such a terrible day, full of disappointment, she'd let her stay. She just hoped it was the last of her troubles for the day. Her son left, and Jennifer collapsed back into her chair, angry and exhausted. What on earth was this attack? Some kind of orphan invasion. Jason rushed off to find some bastard niece, and the son brought a vagrant into the house, to whom congratulations. Now his wife. Funny, can't you see what all those poor orphans are thinking? Jennifer herself, having left her hometown, cut off ties with her family forever. They were too cramped and simple for her, and it was important for her to seem like a real aristocrat. How else would she hook up with a millionaire husband? There was no point in introducing her family to him. And then, once they found out that she was a rich woman, they would all be sure to start begging her for money. That would have been too bad. It was easier to forget them forever. Emily entered the room timidly, keeping her hands in her husband's. "Hey." "Hello, Jennifer Smith." Without rising from her chair, she nodded stately. Good evening, please." Michael smiled and pushed his wife forward. Emily looked down at the snow-white, clean carpet with horror. "I'm straight from the street. I'll get it dirty." She bent down, quickly unlaced her sneakers, and walked barefoot across the carpet. A faint grin appeared on Jennifer Smith's lips. This girl's upbringing was a mess. Taste, too. Her gaze immediately noted the girl's unnaturally long eyelashes and overdone manicure. She must have done it for some holiday, but to get rid of it all at once is neither the smartest nor the money. Maybe it's in honor of the wedding. Mike, she turned to her son. Would you excuse us for a moment? I promise you I'll be white and fluffy. No, I won't, Emily replied. I'm very worried. So no, I'm not worried, Emily said. On the contrary, I'm all right. Dim, Jennifer Smith, Michael winked conspiratorially at his sister-in-law. That's what female solidarity means. Go, and Emily and I will talk about our own female. Well, he shrugged. Then I'll probably walk for an hour and that'll be enough for you. Mel's course, son. Jennifer Smith smiled honeyedly, left alone with her daughter-in-law. Jennifer looked long and silently at her guest. The disappointment wasn't total. Actually, knowing something about Mike's tastes, one could assume that he was enchanted by some young nymph with the features of a grenadier beauty, or at the very least a shabby, low-key, but viciously beautiful dancer. Emily had neither freckles nor teddy bear eyes. Snub nose, inappropriate lipstick. Cheap. What was Michael falling for? Was it the cleavage and the round ass? That's ridiculous. The pause was getting longer. And Jennifer Smith was deliberately stretching it out, taking a strange, sadistic pleasure in seeing Emily and her confusion. The girl clapped her eyelashes together pitifully. She'll cry with disgust in a minute, Jennifer thought, and Mary will stain the upholstery with her cheap makeup. Gross. So how long has it been? She finally asked. Emily flinched. What? When did Michael and I meet? No, Jennifer grumbled. I'm asking about that. She gestured squeamishly at the girl's stomach. What's the time frame? 3 months, I think. The doctor said 6 weeks. Jennifer Smith heaved a sigh of relief. I forgive a lot of things, but this is too much. How long do you want? What? No, she's a fool after all. The mother-in-law couldn't stand it. Let's say how much you want and call it a day. Don't think I'm going to weep with mortification that my only son wanted you. I don't want anything, and I'm not going to have an abortion. Michael and I want this baby. No, girl, it's not like that. You're the one who wants this baby so that you can take possession of the Johnsons' fortune later. Michael, you can cheat, but me, you can't. But I'm warning you, you don't get me out of your life. And I'll immediately rewrite my will, give everything to charity, just so long as it's not to you. What nonsense, you say? The girl shrugged and headed for the door. And Michael? Michael thinks you're a smart woman. Okay, stop. Jennifer Smith grabbed her purse, jerked it open, and change, keys, lipstick, and bank cards spilled onto the carpet. She picked up the card, walked over to Emily, and shoved it forcefully into her hand. There's $100,000 here. That's enough for an abortion at any clinic. You can spend all the money, you don't have to pay anything back. But just get out of our family life. You don't know him. And I've known him since birth. He'll run away from you himself in a month or two at most, but then you'll be left with nothing, no money and no shame. That's what you think. Now go away. We have nothing to talk about. She turned away to the window. Emily, without a word, went out quietly. Michael sat in a coffee shop not far from the house. He liked this place. It was always quiet, cozy, and the aroma of fresh baked goods was associated with the warmth of home. It was a nice, warm place, and when he met the owner of the chain, he liked it even more. Jason Anderson turned out to be a cordial friend of his mother's and a great person, though perhaps Michael's judgment was superficial. After all, they had only crossed paths a couple times. Truthfully, Michael never realized what the pair had in common. It was hard to imagine two people more unsuited to each other. Spring cold, beautiful Jennifer living in her crystal white world, and Jason, so earthy. Michael, is that you? He heard a sonorous male voice and turned around. Jason was already walking toward him, smiling broadly. Well, we meet again. Would you like some coffee? Yeah, that's what I came for. Were you going to your mom's? Jason grinned sadly. I'm afraid not, Michael. Your mom and I broke up. Oh, really? Yes? You don't have to try to be tactful. I'm here because I just got off the plane burying my brother. I'm sorry, Jason. I didn't know. Yeah, that kind of thing. The man sighed. You see, I needed to find one more person, and it turned out I needed to look in this very town. So I got back earlier than I planned. He bit his lip, and his eyes became moist. Michael didn't know what to say, but it was awkward to look at Jason now. Strong people don't like other people's stares in moments of weakness. Emily stepped outside and greedily inhaled the air. What was she saying? This nightmarish, cold, beautiful woman. Did she really think her son was going to be tricked for an inheritance? Emily, though raised in an orphanage, had never considered herself destitute or self-serving. For one thing, she had a father. She never saw him, but she received letters and gifts from him. In his letters, he apologized for not being able to take Emily to live with him. He knew his wife would not accept the girl. Emily took no offense. The letters were enough for her. It proved that she wasn't a complete orphan. She was an adult. She got a profession as a manicurist. Of course, a manicurist is not a high-paying job in a salon. Not a brilliant career, but she made an honest living and didn't complain. And she fell in love with her Michael before she even knew who he was. Her mother-in-law's accusations were so unfair, but even worse was the fact that now because of her, Michael would be left without an inheritance. Her mother-in-law stumped her with this threat. "I have to disappear neatly somehow," she thought. "This move, change my phone number." More than anything, Emily wanted to find her husband immediately and tell him everything. But when she saw him hurrying toward the gates of her mother's house, she instinctively hid around the corner. It was still possible to catch up with her husband, to call him, but for some reason she was afraid that if because of her, Michael would be forever at odds with his mother. Emily felt her father's presence in her life and knew how dear parents were to their children. Meanwhile, Michael later knocked on his mom's room. "Come in, son," Jennifer exclaimed. He stepped into the whitewashed interior and squeezed his eyes shut out of habit. "Where's Emily?" "She left after previously calling me the last words I don't even want to repeat." "Called you names too," Michael said, confused. "Come on, she couldn't have." "That's ridiculous. Emily's not like that." "That's too bad, son." His mother smiled. "Why are you such a bad judge of character? Your Emily was yelling here that she really hopes I don't live long, and then she'll get all our money and property, and also kindly informed me that she'd been following me on the internet for a long time. And when she had the good fortune to meet you, she decided that now she was sure to get her way." "I don't believe you," shouted the son, pale with rage. "I don't. You have just made it all up." "How ungrateful you are," sighed the mother. "Should you be glad you're rid of that predator?" Michael did not finish listening to her. He ran out of the room, muttering something to himself. What was it? Jennifer couldn't make it out. And it didn't really matter. The important thing was that she'd won. She could be sure Emily would leave now that he was out of the inheritance. She settled back on the bed and smiled contentedly. At least she'd remembered something pleasant. A painful memory stirred. Jennifer pressed her lips tightly together. There was nothing to think about him. He'd traded her for some illegitimate girl he considered his blood. This scum who would squeeze money out of him was more important than the woman he loved. Tears still traitorously came to her eyes. What a shame it was to have that serene happiness end so soon. Emily waited for her husband to disappear into the house and looked around. Surely his conversation with his mother wouldn't last long, so he'd be heading back soon. Needing to get out of sight, she sighed and walked quickly across the street to a cozy coffee shop not far away. She could sit there and wait for the bus without having to stand in full view of everyone at the bus stop. Jason didn't pay any attention to the people who came in. He was too absorbed in his own thoughts to wake up until Emily asked softly, "No, excuse me, is this seat taken?" "No, it's free. Have a seat." The girl sat down and smiled. "Sorry, I just have a good view of the bus stop from here. I don't want to miss my bus." He looked at her curiously. "That's strange. Do you remind me of someone?" "Yeah, who?" "My brother. He died recently." "No. Listen, what's your name?" Annie was a little embarrassed. Emily Christensen." "Does that mean anything to you?" Jason smiled happily, brightly. "You also lived in a neighboring town and grew up in an orphanage, didn't you? And your father. I only got letters from him. You know him. That's my brother. So I found you. I found you back home. Then they told me you were here. And I was wondering what to do. The city's so big, it's like a needle in a haystack. I've got everyone on my ass. Emily, did you find yourself?" That's what the girl said. "So you're my uncle. What's your name?" "Jason's my name. But listen, you have to tell me everything about yourself. What do you study? Where do you live? Is there anything you need?" "No, not at all." Annie answered hastily. "I live very well and I have nothing to complain about. I rent a room, I work in a good place, I'm a manicurist. I'm doing all right, except I'm about to have to move out. No, wait, Jason interrupted her. You don't have to rent. I have several apartments in this city, and you can move into any of them. Oh, and maybe you'd like to get a different profession. I can help you. I'd like to study to be a beautician, but I guess I should probably wait on that now. Why? Because she hesitated. I'm pregnant. You married? Jason wondered. I don't think I am, Emily answered sadly. Okay, he stood up. Let's go to my place right now. I have a big house, and you can stay with me. A pregnant woman shouldn't live alone. Uncle Jason, I'm so uncomfortable, stop it. She objected. He helped her up. I'm your own uncle, and you say uncomfortable. And by the way, I've already figured out what room we're going to use for the nursery. Let's go. Jennifer hadn't been able to find a place for 6 months. Michael had cut off all contact with her, never answering his cell phone, never answering the door, or even reading her messages. The housekeeper Jane, with whom he occasionally called, said that he was all worried about his wife, who seemed to have disappeared into thin air. No one knew where she'd gone, and Michael went out of his way to find her. She felt sorry for her son, but how could she explain to him that there was nothing to grieve for? Choose, instead of a cheap fortune hunter, a pretty girl from a good, and most importantly, wealthy family and marry her. If you want to become a father of a family so much, at least you can be calm and know that you marry not because of money. And Michael was desperate, especially since it was already approaching the date when the baby should be born. He made it a rule to call every day all of the maternity hospitals to find out if they have not received a woman in labor named Emily Christensen. If Emily didn't leave town, she had to give birth somewhere. And one day he was lucky. Emily nonchalantly clarified the voice in the tube. Just today, she is already discharged. What time? Michael shouted. What time is the discharge? Half an hour later, he was already standing at the door of the maternity hospital with a bouquet of flowers and a desperate hope that Emily would still allow him to at least look at the baby. Michael, he instantly recognized that sonorous voice. Jason Anderson greeting someone too. The man smiled. Remember, I told you. So I'm meeting her. The girl's got some kind of strange history with her husband. I still don't know who that scoundrel is. She refuses to talk about him. Oh well, whatever. But Sandy had twins. Great boys. I'm a great uncle now. At my old age. That's okay, Emily. Michael interrupted him. You said Emily. Yeah, my niece. Wait till you see this. By the way, who are you meeting? Wife, girlfriend. Jason kept talking, dragging Michael behind him like a tugboat. He wasn't really interested in the guy's answers. He was too preoccupied with his happiness. And Michael didn't answer anything. He suddenly realized who he was about to see, and he wasn't wrong. Emily, a little tired but so happy, came out to them, holding her son in her arms. The nurse solemnly handed the second one to Jason. Here you go, Grandpa. She smiled. Michael. She stopped, not knowing whether to be happy or sad. He stepped toward his wife. I finally found you, he said. Shoo. I finally found you, and I'll never lose you again. Jason, if he was surprised at what was happening, was careful not to let it show. He hummed a lullaby, rocking quietly with a baby in his arms. Jennifer Smith sat in her husband's office and stared in shock at the man in the strict business suit. He was spreading some documents, invoices, bills on the table, pointing to numbers she didn't understand. But she did understand one phrase, and now she wanted to live in despair. I'm afraid you're ruined, Jennifer Smith, she asked in a hoarse voice. How did this happen? You entrusted the administration of your late husband's affairs to a third party. You didn't handle them yourself. Is that correct? Jennifer, forgetting her makeup, rubbed her eyes with the palms of her hands. Yes. My husband hired a new trustee shortly before his death. I let him run the business. I don't know anything about business anyway. Well, the man shrugged his shoulders. You should understand. Of course, we will try to initiate criminal proceedings, but I must warn you, economic crimes are the most difficult to prove, all the more so when a professional has obviously worked here. Everything looks transparent, and you entrusted him with the management. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. So, there's no hope? She asked. We'll try to do something, but I can't promise you anything. I can only give you some advice, if I may. Investigations, trials, they don't all happen in a day. You have to understand that. It'll be easier for you if you try to sell your mansion, buy a modest apartment, then you'll have money left over. But you'll need a job too. Money runs out. Run out of money, Jennifer echoed. It's been 3 years. Well, Jennifer Smith, as of this year, you are now moving from assistant to full-time caregiver. Congratulations, announced the kindergarten director. Jennifer burst into tears. Working here with the children allowed her not to feel lonely for long periods of time and to feel alive. After all, in the modest one-bedroom where she now lived, only the television was her only companion. And now she was on her way to meet her first group of babies. Her assistant had already taken a few of the girls at the gate. As Jennifer looked around the prepared room for the group, "Hello," she heard 2 boyish voices behind her. Jennifer turned around and it felt like her heart skipped a beat. The twins looked like 2 drops of water like her son. "Hello, guys," she said, pulling herself together. Let's get acquainted. What are your names?" "For Sandy and Victor," the couple said in unison. Jennifer's whole day went like a dream. Annie looked forward to the evening with anticipation and fear at the same time. She had to shed many bitter tears and utter words of remorse. When Michael and Emily came to pick up the kids, at first they were adamant about transferring to another daycare center. But Michael was always kind, although he was not ready to forgive the mother, but noticing how she had changed gave her a chance. And 6 months later at the birthday party of the twins, Jennifer cried again, but with happiness. After all, now they were all together as a family sitting at home at a large festive table. And Jason was holding her hand.
Emma stood looking at the wall, which was half wooden, half plastered. Those black letters, which were scrawled in charcoal or scraped and darkened by time, stabbed her eyes. She blinked, a tear falling down her cheek. When the woman went into labor, she already knew she was having a girl. But why so early? She was getting frustrated. "Be patient," her sister held her hand. "I'm doing the best I can." Angelica clutched her eyes. "That's it." The sister looked out the window of the ambulance. The hospital should be showing soon. When already, exhaled with a sound the woman in labor. "Now, be patient, my dear." They had already wrapped up in front of the hospital building. It didn't go as planned, but the baby was born. "A girl?" She looked at the doctor. "Yes," he smiled. Emma had been born prematurely, so she needed extra care. Her parents had gotten over that. But what no one had expected was that she would develop another disease. The baby had to be taken to another hospital, and the mother could not be put there with the child. She went under the windows, whimpering, crying, wondering what was wrong with her baby. "Angelica, I can tell you that your child is better. I can discharge you." The doctor pleased the woman. "Is she going to be all right?" She looked at the man with hope. "I hope so. I want the baby to always do well." Angelica cried again. She and her husband had waited so long for this pregnancy that they had given up hope. Their eldest son was already 9 years old. And when they had already given up on everything, Angelica found out that she was expecting a child. "What a surprise," rejoiced Stan, Angelica's husband. "I'm glad, but I'm afraid to jinx it," she said quietly. From that time on, Stan protected his wife from whatever happened. If there was bad news, he hushed it up, smiling as if all was well. Some messed up at school, never said a word either. And now Emma's lying in her crib with her family. She liked that she had such a company. She felt like an adult. She thought it was possible to be rude to adults and do different things. And her father and mother never expected that a nice and good girl would grow up to be such a miracle. "Emma, tomorrow is grandmother's anniversary. The whole family will have to go," her mother told her. Oh, again to go to this grandmother, listen to her strange stories. The girl did not understand why always do it. "What are you saying? She is the only one we have left. There are no more old relatives." Took offense at her father. It was his mother. "Well, I'll go," she said reluctantly, and went out again. "Angelica, why don't you put her in her place?" Her sister asked her. "Yes, what place? Have you seen how she behaves?" The woman lamented. Exactly. And it is necessary to put such people in their place immediately. If you give weakness now, then later you will not be able to cope with her at all. The sister was sure of it. Listen, how old I am. I want my daughter to love me, not hate me. The woman was ready to cry. Why should she hate you? The sister didn't understand that. It's just that if I start forbidding things now, she'll do the opposite. If I forbid her to go out late, she will go out even longer, and what will happen to her? I don't know, so let her go out. Her head and legs are safe. Everything is fine. Angelica didn't understand how to bring up her daughter. Unlike her, Emma's brother was quite different. He had long ago graduated from school, entered, studied, now worked and lived with his family. His mother wasn't worried about him at all. But her daughter, on the other hand, had gotten out of hand. The next day, as agreed, they gathered the whole family and went to her grandmother. She set the table and waited for the guests. When all the congratulations were over and the grandmother brought out the hot food, they started talking. "Didn't you try asking about my father again?" a woman asked. "We tried, but it's no use. There's no accurate information," Emma's father told her. "Oh, that's a shame." Grandmother lowered her head. And this was repeated every time the children gathered at her house. "How Mummy loved him," Sarah said. Come on, tell me. We can see you want to tell the story again." Angelica knew her mother-in-law loved to talk about her father, even though she didn't know much about him. "Emma, do you remember the story?" Her grandmother turned to her. "It began," sighed the girl. "We were just little kids then, my brother 9, my other brother 7, my older sister 5, and me 3. She'd always started with it. Yes, we remember you lived in a big house with your family. And then what happened?" asked her son. "He loved this place. It was the most interesting. The war started. We had to go to the front, but my father, because he had many children and was the only breadwinner, was not drafted. He volunteered himself. He said he couldn't just sit at home when the motherland was in danger," Sarah said. "So he went," her son continued for her. "Yes, he left. And then we'd get letters, and Mom would unfold this triangle, gather us, all the children around her, and read. Daddy wrote a lot. He loved Mommy so much that he kept repeating it. I was 3 years old, but I remember how fondly she read what was written in that triangle." Sarah looked around the table. She covered her face with her hands, exhaled, and continued. "There was nothing left until the end of the war. It was the winter of 45. My father hadn't written for a long time. And then, Mother saw the letter carrier. She ran out onto the porch. But it turned out to be a funeral. Not even a funeral, but the news that my father was missing. My grandmother brushed away an invisible tear. After that she smiled. Everyone sat and was silent. "What are you all quiet? Let's get on with it," she said, and the party continued. Emma sat there with a disgruntled face. She had heard this story a million times before and didn't understand why it had to be told again and again. And there were always new facts added. "Do you have a picture of your father?" her son asked her. "I do, but I have to look for it," she answered. "Can I go for a walk?" Emma got up from the table. She thought she'd accomplished her mission. She'd done all the official part. And now, when these conversations started, she just didn't want to listen to them. "Yes, of course, Emma, run along." Her grandmother looked at her. Her mother and father were against it, but there was nothing more they could say. Without even saying goodbye, the girl put on her shoes and went outside. She was with her friends again, everything repeated as usual. "Mom, we have to tell something about a relative who was in the war." Emma came home one day. "That's wonderful. Write about your grandfather." The woman turned to her. "And what will I write about him?" Did not understand the girl that his family stayed home. He wrote letters and then disappeared. "Well, let's make up that he was somewhere, participated in some serious battle, and after that went missing," suggested the mother. "And what, we're going to lie?" Emma wondered. "Why not? You'll write the truth. Mom was sure of her words. What was Grandpa's name, anyway? Emma asked. Oliver, she told her. Well, I'll write something myself. She went to her room, tore a sheet out of her notebook, and began to write something. What did you get? A woman came into her room in the evening. Look, the girl wrote so much, it was amazing. The mother couldn't believe her eyes that her daughter could really make up so much. I didn't make it up, but a friend told me about it, so I tied it to our grandfather. Emma told the truth. The mother sighed. She had read the whole story to the end. The connection with her grandfather was only in the name, surname, and patronymic, nothing else in common. Emma was still friends with her company, and she behaved very badly. One evening, she asked her mother to go to a disco, but it was already 2 o'clock in the morning and her daughter was still out. Where do you think she is? Angelica looked at her husband. How do I know where your daughter is? He was nervous too. That's why he was rude. The man went to bed and Angelica sat waiting for Emma. Various images began to appear in her head, that she had been caught by some maniac or rapist and all the rest. She thought that if her daughter hadn't come in for so long, something must have happened to her. At 5 o'clock in the morning, the mother opened the door and there was Emma. Where have you been? Mother couldn't resist slapping her. Mom, why? She looked at her with red eyes. Come quickly and go to bed. The woman said strictly, went to her room and lay down. Are you here? Her husband turned to her. Yes, she nodded her head and closed her eyes. Everything is fine, and you were worried, whispered the man. Go to sleep, Angelica answered him. Further, everything went on exactly the same way. Mother and father were generally afraid that the daughter would not graduate from school, but to their surprise, Emma at the beginning of high school, namely in the 10th grade, left that company, began to communicate with classmates. Her studies tightened up, and unlike the way she studied in 7th grade, her grades were now very good. Daughter, what happened to you? Her mother asked her. Nothing. Why do you ask? She wondered. We thought that you would not go to the 10th, but you not only went to the 10th, but also began to study well, her mother honestly told her. Mom, I'm in love, sat next to her girl. And who is he? Exclaimed her mother. You don't know him. This guy is older than me. Emma wanted to share with someone. I hope you'll introduce us. Angelica was sure of it. Sure, but it would take time, the girl said. They met Mickey at the same disco. One of their mutual acquaintances approached them. Then they joined their company. Then all the evening the guys were together, and the next day, when she was leaving school, the guy met her there with one flower in his hand. Mickey. Emma was surprised at the time. Hi, just thought I'd do you a favor. He handed her the flower. They walked down the sidewalk. Emma didn't know if she was going home or if Mickey had something to offer her. Are you going home? He asked her. Yeah, I have to at least put my bag down, she pointed at it. Okay, let's go. And then I'll take you out for ice cream, Mickey said childishly. Emma laughed. What's so funny? He didn't get it. It's like we're 9 years old that you're asking me to go to the cafe for ice cream. She was still laughing. Okay, I'm taking you to a cafe to drink champagne, he told her. She laughed again. What's so funny now? He didn't understand. No, it's just that she was smiling sweetly. With the guy had developed such a relationship that Emma didn't know how they felt about each other. Turns out she liked him and he liked her too. But he wasn't taking any action, Emma even less so. You're always so mysterious, he told her. I just want to know what's going on between us. I've already told my mother about you, and we still have nothing. The girl was truthful with him. And what do you want? He did not understand. You and I have been together for more than 4 months. We go out every day. You pick me up, give me gifts, flowers, but we do not hug, do not kiss. I do not know how to understand our relationship. Are we just very good friends, or are we boyfriend and girlfriend? She asked him. Okay, if you need an official statement, Then I'm telling you that you and I are boyfriend and girlfriend. Mickey was sure of it. Okay, why aren't you hugging and kissing me then? She asked him the next question. I'm afraid, he admitted. Of what? She didn't understand. You're just a little girl. How can I do anything to you? He was very honest. So that's the problem, the girl realized now. All through 10th grade and summer vacation, they continued to be friends. And on September 1, when the girl went to the 11th grade, she decided to introduce Mickey to her mom and dad. Here we are, they came into the apartment. Oh guys, come on in. Angelica greeted them on the doorstep. She was so pleased that her daughter had met such a handsome guy, who was now not against even coming to visit her. Hello, said the young man politely. Come in already, the girl hurried him. Come on, Emma, looked at her sternly mother. They went into the room. The woman smiled all the time. She wanted to get to know her daughter's suitor better. There was cake and cups for tea on the table. Everyone made themselves comfortable. Mickey was silent at first. He was shy. There's no need to be embarrassed. Everyone is here. The woman touched his arm and spoke. It's okay. He looked up at her. Tell me about it. The father was ready to listen to the boy. Why are you picking on him? We're fine. Emma moved closer to her boyfriend. We're not bothering you. I just wanted to know if you're going to enroll now. And what are Mickey's plans? It's okay. We've already talked about it. The young man started talking at once. And what was decided? The mother was also interested. Emma will not go anywhere. She will enroll here. There is an option that if she leaves, I will follow her, at least for a while, the boy said firmly. Parents rejoiced. They realized that the daughter found a responsible and serious groom. Now they were not worried about Emmy's future. They realized that she would do well. Mickey, you need to meet our grandmother, Angelica told him. Oh, not again, Emma whispered in his ear. Why would you do that? He turned to her. Yes, Sarah likes to tell the same story every time. But we're used to it. But Emma reacts that way every time, her mother said. Okay, thanks for everything. We have to go. Emma got up from the table. Come again. Her mother shook Mickey's hand. The young people left the apartment. What are we going to do? They stopped in the yard. Let's have a serious talk about school. Now I've made up my mind for your parents. But, you know, I have a job. I can't go after you. While he was saying all this, he was nervous. Mickey, I've already applied to another city, Emma said sadly. She thought that everything her boyfriend said was true. Okay, I'll try to do something, he went. Emma ran after him. Wait, it seemed to her that Mickey was starting to feel differently about her. Come on, he put his arm around her. The young people went to another city after all. The guy had transferred and now worked there. Together with Emma, they rented an apartment. They were practically a family now. Mickey, are we going to get married? She asked him cautiously at night. We would someday, he said. All right, she took offense, but said nothing aloud. So they went on with their lives, him working, her studying. Everything was fine, but Mickey never proposed. Emma graduated from college. She no longer asked, but insisted on getting married. Mickey, either we go to the registry office or we split up. How long can we wait? She shouted in the evening. What are you getting mad for? He looked at her. Don't you love me? She asked in the same loud voice. Why would you say that? He didn't understand why Emma couldn't wait. Why then? Now the girl was crying. Now you'll get a job. We'll get on our feet. We'll buy an apartment, and then we'll talk about the wedding. Mickey calmly explained. I love you. She squirmed against him. Everything's going to be okay, he kissed her. And Mickey wasn't lying. He worked hard, saved money. Emma got a job too. 3 years passed. The girl was coming back tired from work. She opened the door of the apartment, felt that smells delicious. Are you cooking? She was surprised. Come in. My love, he came out to meet her. Emma walked into the room. There was a table in the middle with appetizers, a cake, and a bottle of wine. What was the celebration? She started to remember. Maybe she had just forgotten. Emma, will you be my wife? He knelt down in front of her. Ah, she squealed and squeezed her eyes shut. Is that a yes? He stood up and handed her the ring. Yes, yes, yes. The girl jumped on the spot. She put the ring on her finger, took her hand away, admired it. The fatigue she had after a day's work went away instantly. Mickey poured wine into glasses. One of them served the girl. Soon the wedding was to take place. Let's not waste money, she whispered to him at night. Why, don't you want a party? He was surprised. He knew that all girls dream about it. No, let's buy a house, she was silent. What house? It was the first time he'd heard of it. I dream of having a house somewhere outside the city, in the countryside, so that you can go there, with friends to communicate, to rest your body and soul, Emma said. Why didn't she say anything? Mickey wondered. I don't know, she was happy. At the weekend, they went to Emma's parents and they met them. When they heard about the wedding, they congratulated them. We decided to just sign, so we'll call when we can come, the girl told her mother. You won't regret it later. The mother wasn't sure of her decision. No, we want to spend the money on something else, Emma said cryptically and looked at her future husband. Okay, suit yourself. The woman looked at her daughter and smiled. She was so happy for her. A few weeks later, Mickey and Emma became husband and wife. They rented an apartment, and with the money they had saved, they started looking for a suitable house. We should go to the experts, Emma said. That's what we'll do, her husband agreed. They called, found a realtor, and then started waiting for offers. After that, when the calls came in, they would choose whether or not to go to the village. No, it's too far. Mickey listened to the specialist. And this one was crowded. Emma didn't like it. The search continued. Emma was at work. The girls' colleagues proposed to organize a corporate party on Friday to celebrate the birthday of one of them. Of course, it had been a long time since they'd gotten together. Everyone agreed, and even the boss was okay with it. Mickey, I'll be late tonight, Emma told her husband at the end of the week. Have a good time, he kissed her. Emma put on her shoes, opened the doors and sprinted out of the apartment. At work, everyone was excited for the evening. At the end of the workday, the girls started setting up the tables. Emma, what's wrong? Casey looked at her. I'm fine, a little dizzy. She stood and held onto the table. Have some water and sit down. She walked over to her and handed her a glass. Thank you, she was shaking. After a sip of water, she felt better for a moment, and then her eyes went black and Emma fell to the floor. There was a rush of people, some calling medics, others lifting the girl up. She hadn't eaten anything all day. Maybe that's why, Casey said. The doctors will come and tell us everything. The assumptions were inappropriate here. Emma woke up before the ambulance arrived. What's wrong with me? She looked around at everyone here. You fainted, smiled Casey. Here come the doctors, came the voice of the supervisor. They gave Emma a sniff of ammonia, took her blood pressure. You'd better go home and come back tomorrow, the nurse advised her. Okay, she nodded. Let's go, I'll give you a ride. Casey gave her a hand. Thank you. Emma headed for the exit. There was a lot of weakness in her body. Emma, her husband came out into the hallway. Yes, she wanted to lie down. It's a holiday, isn't it? He didn't understand why she was early. I felt sick, so the girls brought me home. The girl went into the room and lay down. Can I get you anything? He was worried. No, Emma closed her eyes. The next day was Saturday. The clinic didn't work, so Emma spent the whole weekend in bed. Then on Monday, she phoned work, told them she'd be late and went to her appointment. You have all the signs that you're expecting a baby, the young doctor said. What? Why didn't she think of that? The symptoms are similar. I suggest you get it checked out, he smiled. Okay, thank you, Emma. As he scolded, ran out of his office. She couldn't wait to tell her husband about everything. She walked down the street smiling. On the way, she stopped at the drugstore and bought a test just to be sure. Mickey wasn't home. She couldn't wait long for him. She had to go back to work after lunch. Emma had been on pins and needles all day. She couldn't wait to see her husband. She didn't say anything to her colleagues. She was afraid of jinxing him. "Darling, I have such news for you. It's amazing." She flew home. She saw that the light in the windows was already on. What again? He knew his wife was always coming up with something new. "I'm pregnant," she screamed. "Emma, it's happiness." He took her hand and led her into the room. After that, the girl started to watch her diet. Mickey did everything for her too. The realtor didn't call. He asked Emma a few months later. No, she shook her head in the negative. "I guess we must have tortured him with rejections," Mickey suggested. "Never mind him." Emma was in no hurry to go anywhere. Mickey went to work. Emma was still laboring as well. She came back from work, but her husband wasn't home. The girl waited for him, but it was so late that Emma couldn't stand it and fell asleep. She woke up from the knocking of the door, looked at the clock. The time was 3 in the morning. "Where have you been?" She went out into the hallway. "Why are you up?" He didn't expect to be greeted. I asked a question. Emma waited for an answer. "Working," he sighed heavily. "What are you bullshitting me about? You've never been this late." She walked over to him. Not only did it smell like a woman's perfume, but there were lipstick marks on his earlobe. "Emma, calm down," he pleaded with her. "You're acting like a smeek." She went to her room. The girl had never been in this situation before, so she didn't know what to do. She wanted to scream, but she couldn't do it, afraid that the neighbors would hear. "I'm sorry." He came into the room. The devil got in the way. Mickey wanted to hug her, but Emma turned sharply. "Go away," she shouted after all. "What are you doing?" He looked at her. "Nothing," I said. She bent in half, inwardly, as if something had sliced her in half. "What's wrong with you?" Her husband jumped up immediately. "Stand back," the girl said in pain. He grabbed her in his arms, and just like that, in a road, dragged her to the car. "Let go," she lashed out, making it hurt even more. Mickey put his wife in the car and drove to the hospital. There, just as he had done at home, he took her in his arms and carried her into the building. She started to feel violently ill, he told the doctor. Emma was placed on a gurney, unable to lie down, squirming. "It's probably a miscarriage," said the doctor, who was walking beside her. He performed an examination, and his words were confirmed. After that, Emma was sedated. She slept for a few hours. After she woke up, she was told everything. Why? She cried. It was all Mickey's fault. It was all his fault. Emma was happy. One of her dreams had come true. Now, every day after work, she took the train to her house. She had planned a renovation, but she didn't want to hire workers. She prepared everything herself. That's what she did all the time. "You're so happy lately," Casey came up to her. "Some changes in your personal life." "I bought a house." She was glowing with happiness. "Wow, when's the housewarming party?" My co-worker was happy for her friend. "Soon," Emma promised. Waiting, Casey went to her seat. In the evening, as usual, Emma wanted to go to the village. Her mother called. "Do you remember that we're going to Grandma's this weekend?" she asked her. "Oh, I completely forgot." The girl slapped her forehead. "We're waiting for you. Don't be late." The woman spoke in a gentle voice. Okay, Emma decided. She would definitely come. She hung up the phone and smiled. She remembered her grandmother, how she bored everyone with her story. Now she understood her parents too, who used to cringe when Emma rolled her eyes at the old man's tales. The weekend came and Emma was ready to go. She bought her tickets at the train station, boarded the train, and a few hours later, she was in her hometown. "Hello everyone." She entered her grandmother's apartment. Her mother came out to meet her. Parents behaved cautiously. They knew about everything that was going on with the daughter, so they tried not to push her in any way to think about her husband and children. "Grandma, happy birthday." She walked into the room and handed her a beautiful box. Emma, as usual, can't go without exclusivity. Wrinkles spread across Grandma's face. Everyone sat down at the table. First, as usual, toasts, congratulations, and after Grandma looked at everyone, her eyes became sad. "Well, Grandma, come on, start." It was already a tradition. "We lived as a big family." The grandmother dragged out her story. Emma sat at the table. She had heard this story. A reply came to her, informing her that there was very little information. "You need the exact date of birth, where and when he went to serve, when exactly he went missing." At the end, there was a phone number of a specialist who could help answer all the questions. Emma wrote it down. She was going to contact him later. She got home. She definitely needed to go to the village today, but she couldn't make it again. There was a knock on the door. "Hello." Her heart thumped in her chest more often. There was Mickey standing on the doorstep. "Emma, I'm sorry. I can't live without you," he began at once. "Come in." She let him into the apartment. They went into the kitchen. There his wife poured tea, sat down opposite. "Give me your answer," he waited. "I forgave you long ago. But for now, we cannot be together," she told him. "But why?" He didn't understand. "Be patient a little longer," she asked him. "Okay." He stood up. "I love you and I will never betray you again." Emma walked Mickey out. As she closed the doors behind him, there was a pinch in her chest. She didn't want to just take it all back like that. He had to understand that. The time was still not late. The girl decided to make a call. "Emma," she heard a man's voice. "Hello, my name is Emma. I sent you a request about my great-grandfather who disappeared without a vest." She began to speak quickly, afraid that she might not be listened to. "Yes, I wrote you a reply today," the other end of the line confirmed. "I would like to talk about it." She calmed down. She realized that she was ready to listen and help. "Okay, my name is Alexander. You can ask me any questions you want." He was located to her. Emma was ready to talk to him all evening because Alexander knew the answers to many questions. First of all, she told him her grandmother's story that she had heard many times in her life. "Of course, it's all interesting, and if you find the picture, we can do something," he told her. "I've already told my parents to forward me everything my grandmother has," she muttered. "When we find him, I can help you get your great-grandfather's name on the memorial at the Eternal Flame," he suggested. "I think it would please my grandmother." The girl smiled into the phone. "Let's call tomorrow. I'll tell you what to do and how to do it," before saying goodbye, he said. Emma went to bed. She couldn't calm her body that was horny. She imagined how they would do what Alexander suggested, and then she would tell her grandmother about it. But fatigue made itself felt, and after a while, Emma fell asleep. In the morning, as usual, she had to go to the service. She was in a hurry, wanting to dial Alexander's number as soon as possible. When she did, he said that he had found out everything. "For my part, I will petition your administration to authorize the installation of another stove." He went straight to the point. "Well, thank you for your attitude, but what do I have to do?" It was important to her. Even if Grandma's father can't be found, a slab with the family name on it would already be an accomplishment. "Write the story you told me. Attach all the available documents. Perhaps it will be enough." He really wanted to help. Emma sat at her workplace. She was glowing from within. "Why so happy?" Casey asked her. "Sometimes it's such a joy to do things for others," she admitted. The girl finally realized that there was a reason her grandmother kept telling this story. She sat until the end of the workday and then went to the village where she hadn't been for a long time. She didn't do much there today because there wasn't enough time. The house was big, the yard was the same, and there were outbuildings too. Emma wanted to clean everything. Sometimes something would come to hand, and she would look at it. It took a long time. At the weekend, she decided to do it. "Mickey, hello." She called him. "Hello." He fell silent. waiting to see what else his wife would say. He was afraid she would start talking about divorce. "Why are you tense?" She laughed, waiting for you to say. He was silent again. "Remember we wanted to buy a house?" She waited for a reaction. Of course, did she really think he had lost his memory? "Well, I did it, and if you don't mind, you can come back and help me with the repairs." She struggled with the last words. "I love you." He couldn't believe his ears. He arrived, not even an hour later. They took everything they needed and drove to the village. What a place. He looked around, just like she did the first time. "We won't disturb anyone, and neither will we." She stood at the gate. "How many inhabitants are there?" He looked into the distance, where the houses were still standing. "I don't know, we'll get to know each other later." She pushed the gate open. Mickey didn't talk about relationships. He tried not to touch the subject until they got home. He went to get water. Emma had asked him to. He needed to warm her up. At this moment, the girl herself went outside. Suddenly, she heard men's voices. "And then where to?" She listened. "Come on, look for it, and then we'll sort it out." Cut him short, the second one. The girl went back into the house. For some reason she was afraid, and if she was alone, and here they were. The doors slammed. She shuddered. "Are you scared of me?" Mickey laughed. "Quiet. Come here." She waved a finger at him. "What is it?" The young man tensed. "Look." She led him out of the house. There was indeed someone talking outside. "What are they doing out there?" She whispered to her husband. They seemed to be looking for something, he was sure. "Why? And why on our property?" Emma had a lot of questions. "We should just go out and ask." Mickey was determined. "Okay." The girl stood up. They went outside so that they were immediately visible. "And what do you want in our precinct?" Mickey started asking questions right away. "Who are you?" The uninvited guests didn't understand. "The hosts," Emma replied. "What are you telling us? The village is on the verge of extinction. There is almost no one left here," they laughed. "If you want, we can show you the document." Emma stood up and put her hands to her sides. "We do." One of the men nodded. She hadn't expected that. The file was in the car, in her backpack. She had to go. While she was doing that, the men began to negotiate with Mickey. "You see, during the war years, a lot of things happened here. We've been digging for years, and the good stuff is still here," the illegal searcher admitted. "And what do you want from me?" He got curious. "We are a little to your hand, and you do not notice us on your site." He set conditions. "I'd have to talk to my wife, afraid to do anything without talking to Emma." Mickey. "All right, she'll be here in a minute," one of the buddies said. Emma came back with the papers. Everything was legal. She had no doubt about that. Mickey told her what these people were doing here and what they were asking of them. "What are you looking for?" She got curious. "Various things from the war. We told your husband," they said again. "I don't know. I need to consult." She thought she would call Alexander in the evening, and he would give her a precise answer. "What a fool you are for refusing money." The one who spoke looked at her angrily. "And for the insult, you'll get out of here right now." Mickey didn't stand for it. They returned to the house, where the work was up to their necks, the water already boiling. Emma started scrubbing the floors. Even though they needed to be changed, she still wanted to be clean. After that, the work was done outside again. "You don't need to look here. Look." My husband pointed to a machine. "Everything is in the shed." They were afraid, probably, in case it was someone else's, the girl concluded. They were coming home, tired but happy. Mickey didn't know if she'd just called him to help, or if she'd really forgiven him, and now they'd have everything back to normal. He waited for Emma to start talking about it. "Thank you," she said as he opened the doors for her. "Give me the bags." He held out his hands. "It's not hard for me." She walked toward the entryway. Even though they had lived together for so long and were married, they were now acting like two strangers. They were both shy, as if this was the first time they had met. They entered the entryway. went up to the apartment. "Emma, are you sure you've forgiven me and there won't be any complaints?" he asked before they entered the apartment. "Mickey, I've thought it over. I'm not happy without you. I love you, of course. If this betrayal happens again, there's nothing I can do." She looked at her hands. "Emma, I promise you that I will never betray someone close to me again. When you realize it, it's too late. I love you too, and I will for the rest of my life." He hugged her. At home, she told him about Alexander. Mickey appreciated such an act. He had met Sarah more than once and knew her story. "Alexander, hello," she called him tonight. "Good to hear from you again," he answered her cheerfully. "You know, I recently bought a house and she told him about the men who were looking for something on their property. "I know what you mean," he was silent. "Those who do it for the benefit of people from the state and find objects and remains, then give everything to relatives. For them, it constitutes wealth and memory. And these two are looking for themselves. Then they sell everything in the markets. Perhaps they do not give any importance to something and just throw it away. But it would be important. The relatives of those heroes will never get an award or anything else." I thought so. So I set them away from our territory. Emma liked the way this man spoke to her. She said goodbye to the man, hung up the phone, and turned to Mickey. He stood looking at her. "I can't believe we're back together." He wanted to approach her, but didn't dare. "It's going to be okay." Emma walked over to him herself. They went to the kitchen. The girl prepared a simple dinner, sat down at the table. "You are good." Her husband looked at her. "No need for loud words. Nothing has not yet been done. Now when we are two, you can do everything quickly," his wife told him. "Yes, I will help and support you in everything." They finished dinner. Emma stayed to wash the dishes and Mickey went to his room. The next day, Emma went to the post office. Her mom called and said she had found some papers, pictures, and some letters. She had collected all of these and sent them to her daughter. "If you don't have time, I can do it myself," her husband suggested. "You will help me a lot." She was grateful that Mickey supported and helped her in everything. When the girl came home from work, the first thing she did was to start sorting through the papers that had come in. She looked at the picture. It was very pale. It was hard to see anything. The man's facial features were barely visible, but she could see that he was handsome. Emma immediately remembered her grandmother's story, how much people had to go through at that time. "Alexander, hello, it's me again." She dialed the phone number. "Good evening." Emma didn't understand why he was talking to her like that. "I have collected everything that is available, but when and where the grandfather went, no one could say," she reported on the work done. "If you want, I can come to you," the young man offered. They had already talked about it. It turned out that Alexander was only 200 kilometers from the town where Emma lived. "When will it be convenient for you to do it?" "I don't know, but I'll let you know," Emma promised. Life went on as usual. The family was quiet, no quarrels, no hard feelings, and no teasing. Mickey did his best to keep his Billy happy. "Shall we go to the village?" Emma asked him. Of course he was up for it. Emma didn't know why she was drawn to that little house in the abandoned village. She was physically drawn there. "Why don't we get to know the locals?" Mickey suggested Emma. "I wanted to do the whole thing first, so I could invite everyone to visit," she admitted. "I see. Let's get to work then. We can hire workers soon." He looked around the walls. They had wallpaper on them. Probably the new owners just glued them on to cover the whitewash and plaster, the girl suggested. "No one will tell us that," Mickey was sure. "You go to the yard. There's a lot to do there too, and I'll stay here," she commanded. Okay, Mickey had done a lot that day. The yard area was ready for something new to be done on it. Emma started ripping off the wallpaper. It wasn't easy to do. It was glued in place permanently. She managed to get 2 walls done. After that, she sank into a chair to rest. But she wanted to finish everything today, so the girl gathered her strength and started working again. "We need to leave immediately," peeked Mickey into the house. "What's wrong?" She turned and almost fell off the stool. I got called into work. He blushed. Good. She shook off her hands, looked at what little she had left, decided she could finish it tomorrow. They got in the car and drove off. Afterward, Mickey left his wife at home and drove to work. Emma called her mom. Hello, was the sad woman. I looked through the documents you sent me. I think they will help a lot when searching for great-grandfather, the girl said. Grandmother was ill. That's why Angelica was so sad. Is it serious? Angelica was tense. She's in the hospital. She could hear her mom crying. I hope she gets better. Emma mentally wished Branny well. Why didn't they do this before? Why did they wait so long? But nothing could be done now. The main thing was that the machine was running. Everything would be there soon. She thought about the memorial. She sent an application to the administration. She had contacted them more than once. They promised to consider the matter soon. Mickey wasn't home again. Emma didn't think about it while she was talking to her mom. But as she made her bed, different thoughts popped into her head. She was nervous, wondering if after such a short time, he was up to his old tricks. The phone rang in the hallway. Emma wondered who it could be. Emma, she went to the phone. Emma, hi, it was Billy, Mickey's friend. What's wrong? The girl asked immediately. Billy never called their apartment for no reason at all. Come over, Mickey's in the hospital, he told her in a dying voice. What's wrong? She was already screaming. Come to Central Hospital, he hung up. Emma started to pack. Her hands were shaking. She couldn't get into the keyhole when she closed the doors. She hailed a cab. The car was only gone a couple minutes, but to Emma they were an eternity. To the hospital, she called out the address. No need to be so nervous. We can't go any faster anyway. The driver saw how the girl felt. Excuse me, she sat back in the seat, her heart pounding fast. She couldn't believe anything bad could have happened to Mickey. She ran into the hospital lobby, straight to the desk. My husband. Before she could say anything further, Billy came up to her. Let's go. He took her hand and dragged her behind him. They went up to the second floor. There was an operation going on, the young man told her. What happened? Cried Emma. She just couldn't stand it. He was called to work, but he didn't get there. Billy lowered his head. Jesus, him or in him? The girl turned pale and shook even more. Into him, just one sentence, but so terrible. They sat in the hallway. Nobody knew anything. But then, a few hours later, the doctor came out. Is he alive? That's what interested Emma the most. Of course, even the man was taken aback. What's wrong with him? Emma wanted to know. She was so sick. She didn't understand a thing. Everything will be fine. The doctor put his hand on her shoulder. After that, Emma calmed down. She walked over, sat down on the couch, looked at Billy. How did you know about that? She wanted to know why Mickey hadn't called her. I'm the one who bumped into him. He just sat there with his head down like that. What? The girl jumped to her feet. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for that to happen. He covered his eyes with his hands. Scoundrel. Emma had always disliked the man. He was always encouraging Mickey to do something dark. And now this had happened. She would never have believed it was an accident. I know, he seemed to realize it himself. When Emma was satisfied that Mickey was fine and his condition was stable, she drove home. Billy begged her not to report it, but she wasn't going to. She wanted to wait for her husband to recover. She needed something to do to keep her mind off things. Emma started driving again, to work in the morning and to the village in the evening. She walked into the house. She remembered she only had one wall left. Emma grabbed the wallpaper and pulled on it. It started to come off along with the plaster or lime. The plaster fell to the floor. There was still a lot left on the wall. The girl worked tirelessly. Late, she looked at her watch. By car was convenient, but on the electric train, you had to keep track of time. Okay. She took one last tug. Everything fell to the floor again. Emma grabbed her bag. She thought, She'll definitely finish everything tomorrow. She left the house and ran to the station. The girl managed to catch her electric train. She was glad of that, otherwise she would be late for work tomorrow. She drove on and wondered what was going on with Mickey. She wanted so badly to help him, but there was nothing she could do. And then her thoughts went back to Billy. How could he do that? And more importantly, why? But she would find that out from her husband when he got home. The house was quiet and boring again. Emma sat down at the table and started going through her great-grandfather's letters again. The handwriting was uneven, everything was faded, but some of the letters were legible. Why didn't Grandma read them to us? It would have been more interesting, she said into the empty kitchen. Then Emma remembered her grandmother was in the hospital. She dialed her mother's number. "How is our old lady?" she asked the woman. "The same. No change," Mom was crying. "And we had an emergency too." Emma told her mother about Mickey. God, what a disaster. She couldn't believe it had all happened in one day. She decided she wasn't going to wait long. She'd go to work and go straight to her cottage to finish the job. That evening she didn't even have dinner. She had to get to the hospital in time to see her husband. When she arrived, he was already in a regular room. Emma went in, smiled and cried at the same time. "How are you, darling?" she asked him. "You know, it's not so bad," he told her. Both of his legs were broken and something was damaged inside, so they had to operate. Emma sat beside him. She knew he was alive, and that's the most important thing. "Do you know who drove into you?" she asked. "Yes, I know. He came over already," apologized, Mickey told her. What could have happened? Why did he do that? She still didn't understand. "While you and I were apart, I made Jenka my deputy in my firm. Apparently, that wasn't enough for him, and he decided to make sure I wasn't there." He looked at her. "That's stupid," she smiled. "You realize it's stupid, but he probably didn't. And when he did, it was too late, especially since I was a survivor. He comes begging me to drop the application, staring at Mickey's ceiling." "And what did you do?" She was looking at him. "Well, he'll restore my car, but otherwise, let him go," he told her. Emma hugged her husband, kissed him and said goodbye. Then she went home. Tonight, she couldn't sleep. She had some nightmares. In the morning, she woke up not sleeping at all. She didn't understand anything at work. Her co-workers noticed it. "Did something happen to you again?" Casey came up to her. "No, I'm fine. Mickey's already gone." The girl looked at her. "She just didn't sleep well," she admitted to her. "All right, I was thinking about it." Her friend pulled away from her. Emma knew she had to go to the village today. She wanted to do it quickly, but something kept stopping her. She got home, changed her clothes, and left the house again. She had to catch the train. "That's it. One more push, and she could hire workers," she said to herself. Emma already regretted that she hadn't done it right away. It would probably be ready by now. She brought the bags to collect all the trash in them and set to work. When she got to the wall, she did the last one yesterday. She bent down to pick it up and noticed something written on the wall. What was it? She got up and looked closely. There was an inscription, something strange. The letters were jagged. "We've been standing here for 13 days, 16 of us. We haven't retreated." Emma spelled it out. And at the bottom were scratched initials and surnames. Everything was so indistinct. But the girl was already interested. She came closer and began to read the letters. Something was badly erased. She didn't continue. She straightened up and froze. Emma stood staring at that wall of inscriptions without blinking. Tears flowed from her eyes. The meaning of the phrase came to her first, and then, like a bolt of lightning. "Oliver," she screamed, "it can't be." She started thrashing around the house. She didn't know what she was looking for or what to do. Her hands were shaking. Was she really in the very place where her great-grandfather had been in the last moment of his life? The excitement and accumulated troubles took their toll. The girl sat down on the floor and cried. She touched the wall with her hand and wondered if she had imagined it. She stood up and looked again. No, it was all true. Her hands were shaking so bad, she couldn't even hold the phone. When Emma rode in the train, she had already calmed down a little. What if it wasn't her great-grandfather at all? Alexander, hello. Now she didn't care what time it was or whether she disturbed him or not. What happened? He heard that the girl was very excited. I found the inscription, she shouted into the phone. What inscription? What do you mean? He didn't understand. In the house in my house, remember, I told you, where they were looking for wartime objects, she gabbled. What was the inscription? He still couldn't make anything out of Emma's rambling conversation. You wanted to come, she was crying. Yes, I'll be at your place this weekend, he promised. I'm waiting for you. If you can make it sooner, then come, she asked. Her hands were shaking. Her head was not thinking straight. Emma went to the kitchen, took out some pills, and drank a sedative. After a few minutes, she just wanted to sleep. Emma didn't resist her body. She went and lay down. She needed to calm down. Lots to do today. She got up in the morning. Emma arrived at work, immediately called Casey over to talk to her. Why are you so disheveled? She asked. You won't believe it. Remember I told you about the house I bought? Emma asked her friend. Yeah, what happened? Casey could see how excited Emma was. I found an inscription that was left during the war years. The girl was acting like she was out of it. So, Casey didn't understand all those words. Okay. Emma stepped away from her. She wanted to talk to someone about it, but she couldn't because no one but Mickey knew about it. Mickey, she stopped in the middle of the hallway. Hi, excuse me, can I take a few days of vacation time? She ran into the supervisor's office. What's your emergency? He got curious. For family reasons, it was half true. Of course, he put a piece of paper and a pen in front of the girl. She wrote a statement, immediately took a bag, and went to the hospital. She went straight to her husband's room. Hello, darling. She went over and kissed him. You look like you've been through a lot, he grinned. Not funny. She sat down beside him. Tell me about it. He saw that Emma was with the news. Mickey in our house there, Emma cried. What's there? He wanted to get up, but pain shot through his whole body. He couldn't do it. The inscription, she looked around at the people who were in the room with her husband. They looked at her like she was crazy. What was the inscription, he wondered. Okay, later, she decided not to say in front of everyone. Emma went home. She needed to get herself in order, not only her body, but also her nerves. She took another sedative and lay down, then remembered to call her mother. Mommy, I'll probably soon find out where our grandmother's father died, she spoke loudly. Did you get any answers? Mother guessed. No, but I didn't know how to tell the woman. She did not say anything, hung up the phone, went to the bedroom and lay down. After that, she got up again, took out the documents of great-grandfather, but there was no connection between them. The next day, Alexander called, said that he would come in the evening. I'm waiting for you, answered the already calm Emma. She couldn't believe what was happening in her life. She thought it couldn't all be a coincidence. For some reason, she didn't want to buy an apartment, and they had been looking for a house for a long time. And it was in this village, this very house, that Emma's thoughts were interrupted by the doorbell. She snapped out of her seat, opened it. An unfamiliar man stood on the threshold. Alexander, he smiled. Emma, she let him into the apartment. He was just a simple guy, tall, skinny, nothing special. Show him. They sat in the kitchen. She poured him some tea. Here, the girl put some papers in front of him. Yes, this is very good. I can tell you that there is a good chance of finding your relative. He sat looking at the photo. A few hours later, Emma and Alexander were in the village. She immediately took him to that wall. The young man photographed everything. After that, he sent all the data to his office. And now what? Emma wondered. The guys will come. We'll look at everything here. And in the meantime, we'll look at the documents about the battles in this village, he said. It would be interesting, she cried. Come on. He put his arm around Emma. She looked at him. For some reason, she felt so at peace. Thank you. It means a lot to me. Emma couldn't help herself. And me too. The more we find missing soldiers, the calmer the relatives will be. He showed the girl the pictures where the remains were buried. Your organization does a lot of good things, Emma reassured herself. They didn't do anything else. They just waited for the train to arrive and drove back. You can stay at my place, the girl said to Alexander. The husband won't say anything, the young man asked. No, she knew that for sure. Then I will accept your offer, he smiled. In the evening, they sat in the kitchen. The guy told so many interesting things, where and with whom they were, the finds they brought back from each business trip. And we will be able to determine whether it was my grandfather or not, she asked him. I think we will, he nodded. Emma was so easy and relaxed with him. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't thinking about anything. She felt like all of her worries were transferred to him. The guys will work on the information I sent them today, and by the time I arrive, they will have a lot to say, Alexander said and said. Good. Emma realized this was not a quick matter. She made a bed for the young man in the hall and went to the bedroom herself. The night passed quietly. Emma somehow calmed down. Now she thought only about how she would tell her grandmother about her and not only finds. In the morning, they had breakfast. Alexander had some work to do, and then he called Emma to go to the village again. She asked him to wait. She had to go to the hospital to see her husband, and he didn't mind at all. I'll be quick, she told him from the doorway. Good. He looked after her. Emma arrived at Mickey's. He was still lying motionless. Any movement was painful. She told him what had happened in the last 24 hours. She wasn't shouting now. She wasn't nervous. She did and said everything calmly. I congratulate you. You have done a great thing, he smiled. I don't understand how all this could have happened. She saw that others were looking at her and listening. If you really want to, Mickey said. Yes, and that's true. She sighed and stood up, because they were waiting for her at home. Bye, do whatever you need to do. He took her hand. Come on, get well. I'll come tomorrow, as usual. She kissed him and went. After that, together with the young man, they went to the village. There he began his work. Do you need help? Emma was always hanging around. Not yet. He realized that she couldn't sit idle. Well, when you do, just whistle, she laughed. Alexander continued on as a group of people appeared on the horizon. Emma looked at them. She realized that this was the search party. We're here. She waved at them with both hands. There was a girl among the young people. This pleased Emma. She thought she would not be alone. Further, everything happened quickly. The guys set up camp right here. They had everything they needed for that. Small fences, bags, shovels, trowels, scoops, some maps. Emma was interested in everything. Even the village was getting a bit cheerful. So we start here, Alexander said, pointing to the wall of the house. They began to pierce the ground with bayonets, searching for anything. If they found the thing, or even better, a bone, then the painstaking work began. During the day, we managed to find 2 skeletons. They were about a meter away from the house. It was scary, but at the same time interesting for Emma. The search continued. Everything was so monotonous that the girl decided to go look for someone who might know about what was going on here in those times. Hello. She saw a woman walking through the gate of one of the remaining houses. Good afternoon, she turned to her. My name is Emma. I'm the owner of that house over there, she said. And I'm Maria. She waited for the girl to approach her. Nice to meet you. Emma reached her. And what is it that you have going on there? Probably everyone was curious, just did not dare to ask. Do you know what happened here during the war? Asked a question, with which the girl came. My father told me, and you go over there. He lived here then, when he was a child. The woman pointed to the side. Emma saw that there was still a house there. Do you live here? I'd wondered how many people were left. No. We moved to the city a long time ago. We come here for berries, mushrooms, yes, to relax from the bustle of the city, smiled Maria. That's why we bought the property here. Emma thanked her for everything and went on her way. The cottage was old. It was almost completely settled. The windows stood on the ground. Near the gate, a grey-haired old man was sitting on a stoop. Emma walked up to him. Hello, she looked into his eyes. Who are you? The old man spoke, but neither his head nor his eyes moved. Say, here she thought she didn't recognize his name. Do you know what happened here during the war? She asked him. Why do you want to know? Apparently, he was interested in the question, because he turned his head. I bought a house here. She pointed in the direction. Now there are search parties working there. Ah, Harvey's awake. Do you remember anything? It was obvious that the grandfather was worried for a reason. Of course he did. His voice trembled. Will you tell me? She was pulling the words out of him like a pincer. Come on. He got up and walked into the fence. Emma followed him. As they bent down to enter the hut, a foul odor hit her nose. Emma looked around. There were pictures hanging on all the walls. I've lived in this village all my life, born here, and I'll die here. At that time, we thought that the Germans would never reach us. They would pass us by. The village was big. He made a circle with his hand. Where did the soldiers come from? Emma sat down on the edge of the stool that stood there. They were relocating. They came in, probably to ask for something. It was obvious that Harvey didn't know that for sure. How old were you? The girl was counting in her mind. 8, he glared at her. A toddler, she stood up again. Went to see who was in the pictures. You have 8-year-olds now, but we were working as adults back then. Harvey turned away. Well, why did you invite me here? She didn't mind going outside. Here, he handed her a photograph that was as faded as hers. Who's that? She looked at it. Mother and father, they were helping them then, Harvey said tearfully. Let's go. Emma took a step toward the exit. They were back on the street before the girl had learned anything much. What else can you tell me? She looked at the man. They came into the village and started killing anyone who resisted them. They settled in houses, wherever they could. Naturally, the owners were afraid, so they fed the enemy. Those guys who had entered your hut shortly before had to hide. So they hid. He began to tell me. Do you remember it all? Emma wondered. He took a small piece of newspaper out of his pocket, poured tobacco into it, licked it, twisted it, and there was such a commotion. The Germans didn't suspect. They were quietly barbarizing themselves. But when reinforcements arrived, that's when it all started. I don't know how, but they found out about the soldiers, and the nightmare began. Where are you going? Grandpa got up and walked. He didn't look back. Emma caught up with him. Harvey was silent. He was heading towards that house where Alexander and his companions were. The girl thought he had something else to show or tell. On the way, she thought how much this man had been through, at such a young age, to live through a nightmare. He led her to a small ravine. Soldiers, Emma asked. Know us, he turned to her. Who are you? She looked at him puzzled. Everyone who stayed in the village. The police didn't spare anyone back then, and we had 2 of them, brothers who had gone over to the other side. He stood looking at the place. What about? She wanted to ask, but the words stuck in her throat. Me? He turned around. Emma thought he was smiling, but she couldn't see it because of his beard and mustache. Yeah, she felt like she was in a movie, transported back a few years. We were lined up, women were screaming, children were roaring, but the Germans didn't feel sorry for anyone. They just opened fire. I don't know, God saved me. I fell with everyone else, hit a little, covered with bodies, but I was alive. The old man's eyes became moist. God, she covered her mouth with her hands. The soldiers at first sat in cover. Only lone shots were heard. But when the rampage began, That's when everything came to light. The Germans were bringing reinforcements. It was clear that ours could not cope. Those who wanted to went into the woods, but many stayed. They held out to the last, and when the Germans surrounded the house, no one was afraid anymore. At that moment, they reached the very house that Emma had bought. Hello. The boys were digging in the ground. They found something again. Did it say on the wall that they were here for 13 days? The girl looked at Harvey. I won't say how long, but it lasted a long time. It seemed like it would never end. He paused. What? Emma almost ran into him. They ran. 2 were put down here. He pointed to the spot where the remains. You're welcome for now. He said goodbye and hung up. All the remains were examined. Many had shell casings where a piece of paper with names was enclosed. Those who didn't have any were reconstructed with the help of specialists. 10 families received notices that their father, brother, grandfather or great-grandfather was found in such and such an area. Burials were made. Alexander, you are so good, Emma thanked him. If it wasn't for you, none of this would have happened, he replied. Mickey couldn't yet, so Emma drove to her relative's house alone. Hello. She walked into the apartment where her parents lived. There was silence in response. She walked to the kitchen, made some tea, decided to wait. But it was already evening, and no one was home. Interestingly, she dialed her mother's number repeatedly, but the subscriber was off the network. When Emma was about to go to bed, the front door opened, and she stepped out into the hallway. Emma, why didn't you call? Mom was surprised. Why? So I can't come already? She walked over to the woman and hugged her. Of course you can. The woman responded to the hug. Where have you been? She looked at the woman. She was tired. Sarah, your grandmother. She fell silent. What's wrong with her? Emma's heart sank. She's in a coma. A tear slid down her mother's cheek. But she's not dead, Emma exhaled. Yes, but the doctor doesn't give any positive guarantees. Mom sat down on the chair. Mommy, I have some news. She took the woman's hands. What news? She looked up. Emma understood that her mother was tired, but she still wanted to tell her everything she had learned in the last few days. We've heard the story so many times from Grandma, and now I've seen it all with my own eyes. I found out where our grandfather was, what he was doing, how he lived his last day. Not everything Grandma said was true, and how could she know? She was a child. Emma was excited. She couldn't believe what she was saying when she said it. Wow, you've got a story going on there. The mother sat and looked at her daughter. Yes, I didn't expect it myself. I had to go to bed. Tomorrow was a big day. Good night, the women hugged again. Emma couldn't sleep. Now that she had told her mom about everything, she had a chill. She knew that tomorrow they were due to announce that another name would appear on the memorial. It wasn't until a day ago that she herself found out about it. Alexander had reported it. Then she was once again convinced that they were doing their job perfectly. Daughter, wake up. Angelica entered her room. Yes, now she was shattered because she hadn't slept in a long time. They were getting ready. Everyone was depressed because basically everything was being done for Grandma and she couldn't right now. How could it be? Emma lamented. She had waited all her life for this moment, and now that it was happening, she couldn't be here. Life, a complicated thing. Her mother approached her. A lot of people had gathered for the event, all curious about what was going on here. Solemnly announced who was being felt here, and after that the cloth with which the slab was covered was removed. Well, now our relative will be here, touched the woman letters. Yes, and this is all thanks to the guys who do everything for people without sparing their strength. Emma was proud that she personally knows such. It was quiet at Grandma's hospital. Emma sat there and told her what had happened and how it had happened. She can hear you. A nurse quietly came up behind her. Yes, I hope so. The girl spoke softly. It was time to go home. Mickey had been discharged. He needed her help. Hello, she walked into him. Hello. He felt bad that he had missed everything. Let's go. Emma helped him up. They were home. Nothing much was going on. Alexander told me to come to the village. She looked at her husband. If you have to go, was fine with Mickey. Emma looked at him. She realized she had nothing for this man. Maybe she needed him to apologize or something. That's why she took him back. The girl was on her way to her house. Yes, that's what she thought. Not her and Mickey's, but her own. Good afternoon. Alexander was already waiting for her there. She walked up to him, smiling. Why are we all here again? Emma asked. It's a surprise. He walked over to her and took her under his arm. They went to the place where the soldiers had been shot. There was some kind of daze. What was it? Emma understood that they had decided to immortalize the place, but she could not imagine what was under the cloth. Alexander waited until everyone who was in the village at that moment approached. Then he made a speech. It said that nowadays young people do not remember the heroes of that war. It is necessary to remind and support what these soldiers did. They fought for the motherland without sparing their lives. After these words, he pulled down the cloth with a sharp movement. What was there shocked everyone, especially Emma. Alexander, how did you do that? She looked back at her house. I'm sorry I didn't ask, but I don't think you would have said no, he said quietly. The memorial consisted of the very same inscription Emma had found on the wall of the cabin. It had just been cut down, restored, covered with some kind of product. It's so beautiful, Maria said. Emma looked at Harvey, he was crying. She thanked everyone, then went to her room with Alexander. That was it, he looked at her. It seemed like two strangers, she said to herself and him, but you've become so close to me. They hugged, and after that Emma stayed in the cabin a little longer, seeing what was there now, and went to the station. Emma went to the door of the apartment where she and Mickey lived. She opened it with her key. Suddenly, a woman's laughter came from the room. Emma tensed. Who could it be? She walked quietly down the hallway, peeked into the room. Mickey was sitting on the couch with an unfamiliar woman beside him. Hello, she entered the room. Emma? He straightened up sharply. What, you didn't expect? She stood looking at the couple. You'll be here tonight, won't you? His eyes were running. People don't change. Emma went to the room. She pulled out her suitcase and started packing. Some rummaging and whispering could be heard in the hallway. Emma was so disgusted by it all. I guess it was true what people say, that whatever is done is for the best. It was a good thing that the accident had happened then, and he hadn't been there. She heard the clatter of crutches on the floor, turned around. Mickey was standing in the doorway. I'm leaving. I don't think you'll mind if the cabin stays for me. She didn't even want to look at him. I'm sorry. I know what I did was wrong. He was having a hard time standing. So you're not the one for my life. There was no yelling, nothing like that. Emma wanted to wash herself, but there was nowhere to do it yet. She felt like she had been doused in slop. Emma was on her way to her village where there was a cabin. There was no sadness at all. She had come to the place where everything was known. This was where her great-grandfather had spent his days, could be considered his family nest. Maria stood at the gate. Hello. The girl was surprised by her visit. Oh, I'm coming to you. I'm standing here, listening, whether you are there or not. The woman began to gibber. And what did you want? Emma was pleased that she was known and respected here. Let's go. She took her hand and led the way. Emma followed obediently behind the woman. She couldn't figure out what the woman wanted from her. When they entered her house, the girl saw that everything was cozy and beautiful. What are you going to do there? Sit down, drink tea. Now I will heat the bath. Maria began to bother. Emma liked this proposal. She would love to go to the bath. And how did you know that I'm coming? Became curious to the girl. Tom, a neighbor boy, saw you at the station, she smiled. Well, yes, it's a village, laughed the girl. Well, come on, tell me why you have things with you. The house is not ready yet. sat down opposite the woman. Emma did not go into details, just told her superficially what had happened. "Don't worry, girl. Everything will be fine," the woman told her. "And I am not worried. In my life has happened such a miracle, which others cannot even imagine." She looked out the window, which was visible monument to her great-grandfather. "Exactly. Now let's go to the bath," she encouraged her. Emma enjoyed the water and the warmth of the bathhouse. She came out of there in just a sheet, her hair falling to her shoulders. "Emma?" She heard a familiar voice say. "Alexander." She couldn't believe it was him. He was walking towards her, and she stood holding the fabric with her hand. "Hello." He was so close the girl could feel his warmth. "There, I was so attracted to this place that I came back here again," he looked at her. In fact, the young man was deceiving. He really had come back to this village on his own. No one had forced him. He had come to see her. He knew he wouldn't be caught, and later Maria came to him. They met in the street. She told him Emma was at her house, so he came. "Okay, come in." She didn't know what Maria would say, but she didn't care much right now. They went to the kitchen. Emma was uncomfortable in one sheet. She left for a few minutes in the room. She came back in jeans and a t-shirt. It was good here. Alexander had already poured tea. After that, Maria came in. She smiled mysteriously, but did not say anything. "Shall we go for a walk?" Alexander called out to Emma. He wanted to go back to her house. Good, she liked Alexander. Once they were inside, and realizing how much work there was to be done here, the young man came close to her. "I lied to you. I came to see you." He was close again. She could feel him. "And I'm very happy about it," she told him in the same tone of voice. "What about your husband?" Emma felt him tense up. No more husband, and it was true. "Emma," he took her hand, "I liked you." "And I like you." She'd never admitted that openly to anyone. "Will you come with me?" he asked her. "No, I have to finish up here." She looked around the house. "Then let me help you here," he begged. Okay, she didn't mind. Emma needed to go to town. She had to do something about the job. Alexander offered to help her. "What are you going to do?" he asked her on the way. "I'll probably quit, because I'm not going to be able to travel so much. I have money for the first time. And then I'll think of something." She had already thought about it. They were in town when her mother called. "Emma, are you in the village?" she asked her. "No." The girl got worried. "Come, Grandma's gone," the woman cried into the phone. All the same, did not live to see, did not recognize. Emma began to settle down. Alexander reacted instantly. "What?" He looked at her. "Grandmother, the same daughter of Oliver, with whom our story with you began," said the girl. "Let's go." He was ready. "Thank you, you're so responsive." Emma got into the car. They drove to the town where Emma's mother and grandmother lived. Alexander was telling all the way that people can be grateful and not so grateful. And Emma looked at him and saw that this man was her destiny. They arrived. Her mother and father had practically done everything. The farewell was to be the next day. It was decided that Sarah would be buried with her father. "You help your parents, and I'll take care of the rest." Alexander was in his element. "Where's Mickey?" Angelique was surprised. "And your son-in-law has a new love again," Emma said with a laugh. "Yes, and you had to come back for that." Father was indignant. "Okay, let this story go." The girl did not want to remember anything. Alexander really did everything. The farewell passed. Everyone went to the cemetery. Their Sarah was given a final farewell with all honors. "I hope you will meet there," Emma whispered quietly as she passed her grandmother's body. "What are you whispering?" Alexander wondered. And then there was lunch and a sit-down at his parents' house. Everyone liked Alexander. He made a good impression. Happy holidays, children, their mother saw them off. They bought some building materials and went to the village. There, Alexander did everything he could with his own hands. Let me call the construction company. She asked him, and when are you going to file for divorce? Just interested in the young man. It is necessary to go to the city. She went up. If she asks about it, it means not for nothing. Tomorrow, he wanted to be there all the time. The next day, the application was filed. Now Emma felt some kind of freedom. She realized that she and Alexander would be together. Emma called the workers, and they started to do everything. At the place where part of the wall was missing, they could make a window, the girl suggested. Well, they agreed with all her ideas. A month later, the house was unrecognizable. Both outside and inside it was a candy. They could move in. Emma was a free woman by then. Alexander was traveling back and forth. He couldn't leave his boys behind, but he couldn't leave Emma behind either. It took him a long time to travel, but the girl did not want to leave the village. Emma, I'm coming for you. He was willing to do anything to persuade her today. You know my answer. She loved him and missed him too. But she loved this place so much she wouldn't leave for anything. Will you be my wife? He asked the question in his forehead and took the ring out of his pocket. Alexander. She didn't expect it so soon. What is your answer to that? After all, a wife should be by her husband's side everywhere, he manipulated. Okay, if you promise to spend every weekend here. She had her own terms. Okay, even if I can't, you'll drive alone, he smiled. They went to the neighbors, told them they were leaving. The house needed looking after. They didn't want to leave it to its fate. Of course, Grandma Maria stayed to watch, and Harvey volunteered to help. He and Emma got on well together. She often visited him, and he often visited her. His stories were endless. Well, goodbye, my darlings. Emma hugged them. What are you saying goodbye to? As if for good, the neighbor came up to her. Who knows? Emma tried not to cry. She got into the car with Alexander. He looked out the window and they drove off. When are we going to go to my parents? Because they should know the news too. The girl asked him. If you want, we can do it right now. They haven't left the village yet. I want to, she said cheerfully. Alexander made a small U-turn, and there they were on the road. We'll go to Grandma's, Emma said. Sure, we'll do everything as you say you want, and he put his hand on her knee. Her mother wasn't expecting them. She opened the door and gasped. Where are you from? The woman began to fuss. I came to introduce you. Her mother winked at her. But we know each other, the mother didn't understand. Do you know my fiancé? Emma asked. No way. Angelica was happy that her daughter was happy. In the evening, when everyone was sitting at the table, the mother poured tea for everyone. Afterwards, Alexander and his father went somewhere and the women were left alone. I have never been to your house, her mother said reproachfully. That's right, Emma thought. So maybe we should have a girls' night out there, Angelica suggested. Why, we'll go there tomorrow. The girl got up from the table. She was so excited that her mom had thought of this, and she hadn't even realized it. Casey, Emma called to her. Oh, it's been a long time, she said instead of greeting. Pack up, we'll pick you up tomorrow, her friend told her. What's wrong? Where are you going? My friend didn't understand. We're having a hen party, Emma shouted. This had never happened to her before. They started making a grocery list to make a menu. And then Alexander came back. He saw Emma glowing. What are you doing? The young man came over and kissed her. We need to go to the village. She did not ask, Emma asserted. Then the girl's mother explained everything to the guy. He understood. Good, and I'll work for a while. He was ready to do anything for her. The next day in the deserted village, which was considered dying, a real fun unfolded. Maria, Angelica, Casey, and a couple of other village girls were there. Well, Emma, good luck to you. They raised their glasses. And she knew she'd be happy without it. Alexander, I'm ashamed to ask you, but we need to get everyone home. She looked at him. And I have another thing to do there. Good. He didn't even have to ask. Yesterday, when she met Maria, Emma felt sick. The neighbor smiled, said she was pregnant. How come? Do you have X-ray vision? Laughed Emma. Now she wanted to be sure. They stopped by the pharmacy, bought a test. It was pregnancy. In town, Emma asked him to take her to the cemetery. When they arrived, he got out of the car and opened the doors. They quickly found Grandma's grave. Emma squatted near the monument. Now I realize why you spent your whole life telling your story. You knew we would meet, Emma began to say. Do you think it was fate, not chance? Alexander touched her shoulder. Yes, she turned to him and nodded. She also looked at him with her eyes. Children, we were here not long ago. Let's go home, said the mother. Yes, we were, but there was something I didn't know yet, Emma intrigued, as she liked to do. And what was that? They looked at her and waited for an answer. Grandma, the memory of your father will live forever. She touched her stomach. Emma, Alexander approached her. If we have a boy, he will be called Oliver. She turned to him.